The scent of pine and winter filled Eleanor Winter's lungs as she stood at the edge of the forest clearing. Her thin cotton dress offered little protection against the autumn chill, but she'd long ago learned to endure discomfort in silence. The moon hung low and swollen above the treetops, bathing the ceremonial grounds in silver light that cast long shadows across the gathered members of the Silver Paw Pack. They stood in their finery, fur-lined cloaks, polished leather, silver ornaments that caught the moonlight and winked like stars. Ella, as most called her, remained in the shadows, clutching the wooden pendant her grandfather had pressed into her palm before they took him away 5 years ago. "Remember, Ella," he had whispered, his fingers trembling against hers. "Our weakness is our greatest strength. When they cannot see you, that is when you can truly see them." She ran her thumb over the pendant's worn surface, tracing the carved symbol of the crescent moon with ancient script no one alive could read. Her grandfather had been the last to understand the old ways, the old language. The elders had called him a heretic for his beliefs about balance between wolf and man. Now Ella was the only one who remembered his teachings. The pack's annual selection ceremony was a sacred tradition, one that determined the fate of unmarked omegas like herself. Those chosen would serve the pack's elite, the hunters, the council members, and in rare cases, the royal family itself. Those rejected would be banished to the borderlands, left to fend for themselves among rogues and outcasts. As the lowest-ranking Omega in the Silver Paw Pack, Ella had spent her 22 years of life being overlooked, dismissed, or worse, forgotten entirely. Her pale blonde hair, almost white in the moonlight, fell in tangled waves down her back. Unlike the sleek, groomed appearances of the other Omegas lined up for selection, she hadn't bothered with elaborate braids or scented oils. What was the point? No one ever looked at her long enough to notice. The ceremonial drums began, a deep primal rhythm that vibrated through the ground and into her bones. She took her place at the end of the line, eyes downcast as tradition demanded. Around her neck, the wooden pendant felt warm against her skin, her grandfather's final gift before illness claimed him. He had been the only one who saw her, truly saw her, beyond her Omega status. "Stand straight," hissed Diana, the Omega beside her, her dark hair elaborately styled with silver threads woven through the braids. "The council is watching." Ella straightened her spine, but kept her gaze lowered. The drums intensified as the council members entered the clearing, their faces stern in the firelight. Behind them, shadowy figures moved with predatory grace, the alpha elites here to make their selections. A hush fell over the gathering as the final figure emerged from the tree line. Even without looking up, she could feel his presence, a wall of power that pressed against her senses, making it difficult to breathe. The Alpha King. Rumors of his cruelty and strength had spread through the lower ranks like wildfire since his ascension to the throne 1 year ago after the mysterious death of his father. "Let the selection begin," announced Elder Thaddeus, his voice carrying across the clearing. One by one, the Omegas were approached, scented, and either chosen or passed over. Some wept with relief when selected, others with despair when rejected. The crowd thinned until only 3 of them remained: Diana, a red-haired boy whose name Ella didn't know, and herself. The red-haired boy was chosen by a member of the hunting party. Diana trembled as a council member approached her, scented her neck, and nodded in approval. She was led away, casting a final glance of pity in Ella's direction. And then she was alone. The clearing had grown quiet. She could feel eyes on her, curious about the forgotten Omega left unchosen. She kept her head bowed, her fingers clutching her grandfather's pendant so tightly that the edges bit into her palm. "What about this one?" Elder Thaddeus asked, his voice tinged with impatience. "Does anyone claim the last Omega?" Silence answered him. She had expected this, had prepared herself for the walk of shame to the borderlands that would follow. Yet the familiar ache of rejection still burned beneath her ribs. "No one?" Elder Thaddeus pressed. "Then she will be—" "I will take her." The voice cut through the clearing like a blade of ice, deep, commanding, and utterly devoid of emotion. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by whispers that rushed like wind through leaves. Ella lifted her gaze, breaking tradition, unable to contain her shock. Standing before her, towering at least a foot taller, was the Alpha King himself. His face was a study in harsh angles and cold beauty. high cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes the color of a winter storm. His dark hair was swept back from his forehead, revealing a thin scar that ran from his temple to his jawline.
"Your Majesty," Elder Thaddeus stammered, "there are more suitable Omegas from the Northern Territories arriving tomorrow."
"This one," he gestured vaguely at Ella, searching for a diplomatic way to highlight her inadequacies, "is unremarkable," he finally settled on, the word piercing her like a physical blow. The Alpha King's gaze never left her face, his expression unreadable. "I have made my selection." His scent reached her then, pine and smoke, and something metallic, like blood. Her instincts screamed at her to bare her neck in submission, but something in his cold assessment kept her frozen in place. "What is your name, Omega?" he demanded. She swallowed hard. "Eleanor, Your Majesty. Ella." "Ella." He spoke her name as if testing its weight on his tongue. "You will accompany me to the palace." It wasn't a request. As he turned away, expecting her to follow, whispers erupted around them. She caught fragments. "Why her?" and "plain little thing," and "won't last a week," before Elder Thaddeus silenced them with a sharp gesture. Ella followed the Alpha King across the clearing, her legs moving mechanically. She had never been this close to the palace before, had only seen it from a distance. A sprawling structure of stone and glass built into the mountainside, its windows glowing like eyes in the darkness. The old war veteran, Jackson, caught her eye as she passed. Unlike the others, his gaze held no judgment, only concern. He had been teaching her survival skills in secret, preparing her for the borderlands he assumed would be her fate. Now he watched her march toward a destiny neither of them could have predicted. Inside the palace, servants scurried out of their path, keeping their eyes downcast. The Alpha King moved with predatory grace through corridors decorated with tapestries depicting hunt scenes and ancient battles. Ella struggled to keep pace, her worn boots slipping on the polished stone floors. Finally, he stopped before an ornate door and turned to face her. In the warm light of the corridor, she could see his features more clearly. He wasn't just intimidating. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things often are, like the edge of a blade or the eye of a storm. "Do you know why I chose you, Omega?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. She shook her head, clutching her pendant like a lifeline. "Because you were the only one who looked at me without fear or ambition in your eyes. Just emptiness." His lips curved in what might have been a smile on anyone else, but on him it looked like a threat. "I found that intriguing." Before she could respond, he pushed open the door, revealing a spacious chamber with a large bed, a fireplace, and windows that overlooked the forest. Her heart stuttered in her chest as she realized what this room might be for, what he might expect of her. "This is where you'll stay," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "Alone." Relief flooded through her, quickly followed by confusion. "I don't understand, Your Majesty. If you don't want me for that, then why bring me here? Me?" His expression darkened. "I didn't say I didn't want you, Omega. I said you'll stay here alone, for now." He stepped closer, and she fought the urge to back away. "You see, I have a proposition for you." The way he said proposition sent a chill down her spine. "What kind of proposition?" "A simple one." He circled her slowly, his gaze assessing every detail of her appearance. "Survive the night, Omega, and I'll spare you." "Spare me from what?" The question escaped before she could stop it. He smiled then, revealing canines slightly longer and sharper than they should be, even for an alpha. "From becoming like the others, empty vessels serving a purpose until they're no longer useful." He stopped in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Survive until dawn, and perhaps you'll prove more valuable alive than dead." Her blood turned to ice. "You're going to try to kill me?" "No." He stepped back, his expression unreadable once more. "But what roams the palace at night might. The doors will be locked, the windows are too high to jump. You have until sunrise." With that, he turned and walked to the door. "Oh, and Ella," he said, pausing in the doorway, "don't disappoint me. I've developed a particular distaste for disappointment." The door closed behind him with a sound of finality, followed by the click of a lock engaging. She stood frozen in the center of the room, her grandfather's words echoing in her mind. "When they cannot see you, that is when you can truly see them." She had survived being invisible her entire life. Perhaps tonight, that skill would keep her alive. Outside, the moon rose higher, casting silver light through the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a howl rose, long, mournful, and hungry. The night had only just begun. The howling faded, leaving behind a silence so complete she could hear her own heartbeat. Ella surveyed the room, her prison for the night, taking in details she had missed in her initial shock. The bed was large enough for 3 people, covered in furs and silken sheets in shades of deep blue and silver. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Tapestries depicting hunting scenes hung on either side of a large wardrobe, and a writing desk sat beneath one of the tall windows. Luxury surrounded her, but she wasn't fooled. This was still a cage, no matter how gilded. "Survive the night," she whispered to herself, clutching her grandfather's pendant. What had the Alpha King, Dominic Blackwood was his name, though few dared speak it, meant? Was this some kind of twisted game? And what roamed the palace at night that could pose such a threat? She moved to the door first, testing the handle. Locked, as he'd said. The windows were next, 3 tall arches that looked out over the forest and the mountains beyond. The glass was cool beneath her fingertips, and when she pressed her forehead against it, she could see the drop below, at least 4 stories, with nothing but jagged rocks at the bottom. The Alpha King hadn't lied about that either. A soft scraping sound from somewhere outside the door made her freeze. She held her breath, listening. It came again, the whisper of something dragging across stone, followed by what sounded like claws clicking against the floor. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the sounds grew closer, stopping just outside her door. Silence fell once more, heavy and expectant. Then came a sniffing sound, as if whatever waited beyond was scenting the air, scenting her. The handle rattled, and a low growl vibrated through the wood. She backed away, frantically searching for a weapon, a hiding place, anything. The wardrobe caught her eye, large enough to conceal her if necessary, but hiding seemed futile. If something with a predator's sense of smell was hunting her, it would find her regardless of where she tried to hide. The scratching at the door intensified, becoming more frenzied. Splinters of wood fell to the floor as whatever was out there began to tear through the barrier between them. She needed a plan, and quickly. Her grandfather's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, "Watch, listen, think." She forced herself to slow her breathing, to observe her surroundings with clear eyes rather than panic-blurred vision. The room was designed for comfort, not defense, but perhaps... Her gaze fell on the fireplace where flames licked hungrily at a stack of logs. Fire. Most predators feared fire. She grabbed a poker from the hearth set and thrust it into the flames, watching as the metal tip began to glow red-hot. The door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it. Once. Twice. The wood cracked, a long fissure appearing down the middle. She positioned herself beside the door, the hot poker raised and ready. If she couldn't run, she would fight. Her hands trembled, but she gripped the weapon tighter, forcing strength into her arms. The door splintered inward with a crash, and she caught her first glimpse of her hunter, a massive wolf, its fur black as midnight, eyes glowing amber in the firelight. But this was no ordinary wolf. It stood almost as tall as she on all fours, its shoulders bunched with muscle beneath sleek fur, its muzzle wrinkled to reveal fangs as long as her fingers. It paused in the doorway, those intelligent eyes scanning the room before landing on her. A growl rumbled from its chest, vibrating through the air between them. She raised the poker higher, its glowing tip pointed at the beast. "Stay back," she warned, her voice steadier than she expected. To her surprise, the wolf hesitated, nostrils flaring as it caught the scent of hot metal. It paced at the threshold, its massive paws leaving claw marks in the wooden floor. She took advantage of its momentary caution to edge toward the center of the room, putting more space between them. The wolf followed, its movements deliberate, calculated. This was no mindless beast. There was intelligence in those amber eyes, a predatory cunning that assessed and planned. It circled to her left, and she pivoted to keep the poker between them. "What do you want?" she asked, not expecting an answer, but needing to fill the terrible silence with something other than her fear. The wolf's ears flicked forward at the sound of her voice. It lowered its head slightly, muscles tensing in a way that made her instincts scream danger. When it lunged, it moved faster than she could track. One moment it was across the room, the next it was airborne, jaws open and aimed for her throat. She swung the poker with all her strength, catching the beast across the snout. The impact jarred her arms to the shoulders, but the wolf yelped and veered off course, crashing into the writing desk instead of her. Wood splintered as the desk collapsed beneath the wolf's weight. It shook its head, dazed but far from defeated. Blood matted the fur around its muzzle where the poker had struck, but the wound seemed to only enrage it further. She backed toward the bed, keeping the poker extended. The wolf circled again, more cautiously this time. Respect, or at least wariness, in its gaze. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, though she wasn't sure if that was true. "But I will if I have to." The wolf snarled, teeth gleaming in the firelight. It feinted left, then right, testing her reflexes. She kept her gaze locked on its eyes, remembering her grandfather's lessons about predators. Never look away first. Never show fear. Never run. As they circled each other in this deadly dance, she noticed something strange. The wolf's movement seemed almost deliberate, controlled, as if it were testing her rather than simply hunting her. A horrible suspicion began to form in her mind. "Is this part of his game?" she asked aloud. "Did he send you to test me, or are you him?" The wolf's ears pricked forward at her words, and something like surprise flashed in those amber eyes. Taking advantage of the beast's momentary distraction, she lunged for the bed, scrambling across it to put the massive piece of furniture between them. The wolf followed, leaping onto the mattress with ease. The sheets tore beneath its claws as it advanced, its hot breath washing over her face. In desperation, she thrust the poker forward, aiming for the soft underside of the wolf's jaw. But the beast was quicker, dodging the blow and clamping its jaws around the metal shaft. With a powerful twist of its head, it wrenched the weapon from her grasp, sending it clattering across the floor. Defenseless, she backed against the wall, her fingers finding her grandfather's pendant. The wolf approached slowly now, savoring the moment, its prey cornered and unarmed. "If you're going to kill me," she said, meeting those amber eyes, "then do it. But know that I fought. Remember that I wasn't easy prey." The wolf paused, its head tilting slightly as if considering her words. Then, to her astonishment, it backed away, jumping down from the bed to stand by the shattered door. It watched her for a long moment, those intelligent eyes assessing something she couldn't fathom. Then it turned and loped from the room, the sound of its claws clicking against stone fading into silence. She remained frozen against the wall, waiting for the beast to return to finish what it had started. Minutes passed, and the only sounds were the crackling of the fire and her own ragged breathing. Eventually, she slid down the wall to sit on the floor, her legs too weak to hold her. Had she passed some kind of test, or was this merely a reprieve before the next phase of the Alpha King's cruel game? The night stretched before her, long and uncertain. She retrieved the poker from where it had fallen, the metal now cool to the touch, and clutched it like a talisman. Sleep was out of the question, not with a shattered door in a palace that apparently housed monsters. As the adrenaline of the encounter began to fade, she found herself studying the room more carefully, searching for clues, for meaning in this bizarre situation. Why had the Alpha King chosen her? What purpose did this test serve? Her gaze fell on the remains of the writing desk. Amid the splintered wood lay scattered papers, books, and writing implements. Curious, she crawled forward to examine them. Most of the papers contained mundane correspondence, reports from village elders, requests for audience with the king, lists of supplies. But one leather-bound journal caught her eye. It had fallen open to reveal pages filled with handwriting that was bold and sharp, the letters slanting aggressively across the paper. She hesitated only briefly before picking it up. If she was to survive this night, perhaps understanding her captor was key. The journal entries were dated, the most recent from just 3 days ago. She began to read, her heart pounding with the transgression of peering into the Alpha King's private thoughts. The council grows more insistent about the mating ceremony. They fail to understand that I have no interest in a political alliance, nor in some servile Omega who seeks only power and status. The bloodline must continue, they say. The throne must be secured, as if I haven't already sacrificed everything for this crown. She turned the page, her fingers trembling slightly. The dreams have returned. Blood on snow, my father's face contorted in betrayal. The sensation of claws tearing through flesh, my own or another's, I can never tell. The voice that whispers, "A king without compassion is merely a tyrant with a crown." Perhaps they are right to fear me. Perhaps I am becoming what I swore to destroy.
She flipped forward several pages, drawn deeper into the tormented mind of Dominic Blackwood. Another assassination attempt tonight, poison in the wine. The culprit wore my father's ring, a final insult before I tore out his throat. He claimed to act for the good of the pack, to prevent the bloodline from being tainted by madness. Am I mad? The beast grows stronger each night, harder to control. The shift comes unbidden now, drawn out by rage or even mere frustration. The council watches me with wary eyes. They believe I don't notice their whispers, their contingency plans should I prove as unstable as they fear.
Tomorrow is the selection. They've gathered Omegas from across the territory, each one briefed and coached on how to please me, how to tame me. Little do they know that I seek not a mate, but a mirror, someone who might reflect back to me what remains of my humanity, if anything does. She closed the journal, her mind reeling. The Alpha King was losing control of his wolf, becoming more beast than man, and the council feared him, perhaps with good reason. Was that why he had chosen her? Because she was unremarkable, forgettable, a nobody whose disappearance would go unnoticed if his beast took control? A chill ran down her spine as another possibility occurred to her. What if she hadn't fought off a random wolf but the Alpha King himself in his shifted form? Had he been testing her, seeing if she would cower or fight? She tucked the journal into the pocket of her dress. Knowledge was power, her grandfather had always said, and in this deadly game, she needed every advantage. Outside, clouds drifted across the moon, casting the room into deeper shadow. She had survived the first attack, but instinct told her the night was far from over. She gathered what remained of her courage and began to formulate a plan. If another predator came, she would be ready. And if the Alpha King returned, either as man or beast, she had questions that demanded answers. The pendant felt warm against her skin, a reminder of her grandfather's strength and wisdom. "Our weakness is our greatest strength," he had said. Perhaps being overlooked, underestimated, had prepared her for this moment more than she knew. She stood, poker in hand, and faced the shattered doorway. Whatever came next, she would meet it on her feet. The palace grew quieter as the night deepened. She had dragged a heavy chair to barricade what remained of the door, though she harbored no illusions about its effectiveness against the wolf should it return. The fire had burned low, casting the room in amber shadows that shifted and danced across the walls. Outside, the moon hung high in the sky, perhaps 3 or 4 hours until dawn. She paced the length of the room, the Alpha King's journal clutched in one hand, the poker in the other. The wolf hadn't returned, but the feeling of being watched never left her. Several times, she thought she heard footsteps in the corridor beyond the shattered door, but when she listened more carefully, there was only silence. Her mind kept returning to the journal entries, to the torment evident in those bold, slashing words. The Alpha King was feared, even hated, yet his private thoughts revealed something closer to desperation than tyranny. The council suspected him of madness, or was it merely their fear of his uncontrollable power? A soft knock at the remains of her door froze her mid-stride. "Hello?" a male voice called. "May I come in?" She raised the poker, positioning herself behind the chair barricade. "Who are you?" "My name is Samuel. I serve as the royal physician." There was a pause. "The Alpha King sent me to tend to you." She hesitated. This could be another test, another threat in a different form. "Why would he do that?" "He said you might have been injured." Another pause. He seemed concerned. Concerned? The word seemed incongruous with everything she knew about the Alpha King, yet the man's voice sounded genuine. "You can come in," she said, keeping the poker raised, but slowly. The chair scraped against the floor as someone pushed it from the other side. A moment later, a man stepped through the shattered doorway. He was older than she expected, perhaps in his 60s, with silver threading through his dark hair. He carried a leather satchel and wore the practical garments of a healer, loose trousers and a tunic with many pockets. His eyes widened as he took in the destruction. The splintered door, the collapsed desk, the claw marks scoring the wooden floor. "By the moon," he whispered. His gaze found her, noting the poker in her hand, the wild tangle of her pale hair, the torn hem of her dress. "Are you hurt?" She lowered the poker slightly but didn't set it down. "No, not physically." Relief crossed his features.
That's good. Very good. He set his satchel on the bed and began removing items: jars of salve, rolls of bandages, a small mortar and pestle. He'll be pleased to hear it. Why? She demanded, suddenly angry. Why would he care if his little game left me injured? Isn't that the point? Samuel paused, his hands hovering over his supplies. Game? He studied her face. What exactly did he tell you? To survive the night, she said bitterly. That something roamed the palace that might kill me. Then he locked me in, and not an hour later, a wolf the size of a horse tried to tear out my throat. Understanding dawned in the old man's eyes, followed swiftly by something that looked remarkably like pity. Oh, child, that wasn't some random beast. She had suspected as much after reading the journal, but hearing it confirmed sent a chill through her. It was him, though I imagine you figured that out already. She nodded, recalling the intelligence in those amber eyes. Why? What kind of sick test is this? Samuel sighed, lowering himself to sit on the edge of the bed. It's not a test. Not exactly. He seemed to search for the right words. The Alpha King has been struggling to maintain control of his wolf form. The shifts come unbidden now, triggered by strong emotion, and when he shifts, he loses himself to the beast, she finished, remembering the journal entries. Surprise flickered across Samuel's face. Yes, how did you know? She hesitated before retrieving the journal from her pocket. I found this in the wreckage of the desk. Samuel paled. You read his private thoughts, child. If he discovers this— He tried to kill me, she interrupted. I think we're well past worrying about privacy. The old man shook his head. He wasn't trying to kill you. If he had been, you wouldn't be standing here having this conversation with me. Then what was he doing? Samuel was silent for a long moment. Testing you, perhaps. Or testing himself. He rubbed his temples, suddenly looking very tired. I've known him since he was a boy. He was different then, quieter, more thoughtful than his father or brothers. What happened to his family? She asked, moving closer despite her lingering wariness. Betrayal, he said simply. His father, the old Alpha King, was murdered by his own brother, Dominic's uncle. The same night, his mother and younger siblings were slaughtered in their beds. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Dominic was the only survivor? Only because he was away on a hunting expedition. By the time he returned, his uncle had declared himself king. Samuel's eyes grew distant. The battle lasted 3 days. It changed him. The things he had to do, the pain he endured. He won, but at a terrible cost. His humanity began slipping away that day, and it's been fading ever since. She absorbed this information in silence, trying to reconcile the cold, intimidating figure of the Alpha King with the tortured soul revealed in his journal and now in Samuel's account. Why me? She finally asked. Of all the Omegas at the selection, why choose the one no one else wanted? Samuel studied her thoughtfully. Perhaps because you were different. The others were prepared, groomed to appeal to him. You were just yourself. A small smile touched his lips. He has a keen nose for deception, always has. She thought of her grandfather's pendant, still hanging around her neck. Our weakness is our greatest strength. Being overlooked had allowed her to observe without being observed in return. She had learned to see beyond masks and posturing, to recognize truth amid lies. Perhaps the Alpha King possessed a similar skill. What happens now? She asked. Will he return as the wolf? I don't know, Samuel admitted. His shifts are unpredictable these days. He began repacking his satchel. But dawn is still hours away, and his challenge stands. Survive until sunrise and he'll spare you. Spare me from what exactly? Samuel paused, his expression grave. From the fate of those who came before you, the ones who couldn't reach whatever remains of his humanity. A chill ran through her. What happened to them? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Instead, he withdrew a small vial from his satchel and pressed it into her palm. Wolf's Bane essence, he said quietly. Diluted, but potent enough to momentarily stun a shifted wolf. Use it only if you must. It will buy you seconds, not minutes. She stared at the vial, its contents a deep purple in the firelight. Why are you helping me? Sadness filled his eyes. Because I've watched 6 Omegas die in this room over the past year. Because I've treated his wounds after each one, when he claws at himself in remorse once he regains control. He took a deep breath. And because I heard him speak your name when he sent me to you, the first time he's bothered to learn the name of any Omega brought to this chamber. Hope and dread tangled in her chest, twin serpents coiling around her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, tucking the vial into her pocket alongside the journal. Samuel moved toward the door, then paused. "Remember this, Ella. The wolf may be a beast, but it's still him inside. Speak to the man, not the monster." With that, he slipped out into the corridor, leaving her alone once more with her thoughts. She returned to her vigil by the fire, adding another log to the dying flames. The poker lay across her lap, the vial of wolf's bane within easy reach. She found herself wondering about the Alpha King, Dominic, as Samuel had called him. How much of the man remained when the wolf took control? Was he aware of what his beast did, or did he wake to the aftermath with no memory of the night's events? Time passed in an eerie stillness. The fire crackled, shadows danced, and outside clouds drifted across the face of the moon. She must have dozed, despite her determination to remain alert, for she jerked awake to the sound of claws clicking against stone once more. She was on her feet in an instant, poker in one hand, vial in the other. The chair she'd placed as a barricade still stood in the shattered doorway, but beyond it, amber eyes gleamed in the darkness of the corridor. The wolf had returned. It approached more cautiously this time, head low, ears slightly flattened. Blood matted the fur around its muzzle where she had struck it earlier. It stopped at the threshold, studying her with those intelligent eyes. "Dominic," she said, using his name deliberately, watching for a reaction. The wolf's ears pricked forward, a soft whine escaping its throat. Recognition, confirmation. "I know who you are," she continued, her voice steadier than she expected. "I know what happened to your family, what you've endured." The wolf paced at the threshold, agitated now, its massive head swinging from side to side. Was it the man or the beast that responded to her words? She couldn't tell. "I've read your journal," she admitted, watching carefully for any change in the wolf's demeanor. "I know you're losing control, that you fear what you're becoming." She took a step forward, then another, until she stood directly before the barricade. "I know you don't want to hurt me." A growl rumbled from the wolf's chest, but it made no move to breach the barrier between them. Its eyes never left hers. Intelligent, assessing, conflicted. "Samuel told me about the others," she said softly. "The Omegas who died in this room. He said you regretted each death." She reached for her pendant, drawing strength from its familiar contours. "I don't think you're a monster, Dominic. Not yet. But you're becoming one with each life you take." The wolf's growl deepened, hackles rising along its spine. She had struck a nerve. "You chose me because I was different," she continued, taking another step closer. "Because I looked at you and saw neither a king nor a beast, but something in between, something still human enough to recognize itself in another outcast." The wolf lunged suddenly, knocking the chair aside with a powerful swipe of its paw. She stumbled backward, nearly dropping the vial of wolf's bane. The beast advanced into the room, its massive form seeming to fill the space, blocking the firelight. She raised the poker defensively but didn't retreat further. "I'm not afraid of you," she lied, her heart hammering against her ribs, "and I'm not going to die in this room like the others." The wolf circled her slowly, its breath hot against her skin. This close, she could see the individual hairs of its pelt, the powerful muscles that rippled beneath, the intelligence that burned in those amber eyes. It was magnificent and terrifying, a perfect predator. "I see you, Dominic," she whispered. "I see the man and the wolf, both parts of you, neither one complete without the other." The wolf paused in its circling, head tilting slightly. Something flickered in its gaze, confusion perhaps, or surprise. Slowly she lowered the poker, though she kept the vial of wolf's bane clutched tightly in her other hand. It was a risk, but instinct told her that weapons would only provoke the beast further. If there was any hope of reaching the man within, she needed to speak to him without threat or fear. "I understand what it's like to be overlooked, forgotten," she said, "to be seen as less than you are, to have others decide your worth based on what you appear to be rather than who you truly are." The wolf growled softly, but there was less aggression in the sound now. It sat back on its haunches, still watching her intently. "You've lost your family, your sense of self," she continued. "You're afraid of what you're becoming. I can see it in your eyes, Dominic, the same fear I've carried my entire life. The fear of disappearing completely, of becoming nothing." The wolf whined, a plaintive sound that seemed too vulnerable for such a fearsome creature. Emboldened, she took a step toward it, then another. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to fight, to use the wolf's bane. Instead, she held her ground, her gaze never leaving those amber eyes.
"I won't submit to you because I'm afraid," she said. "But I will stand with you, if you'll let me, not as king and subject, not as Alpha and Omega, but as two souls who recognize the loneliness in each other." The wolf rose, approaching slowly. Its muzzle hovered inches from her outstretched hand, hot breath washing over her skin. One snap of those massive jaws would sever her arm at the wrist. One swipe of those claws would tear open her throat. Instead, the wolf pressed its snout against her palm, a gesture so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. "There you are," she whispered. "There's the man behind the beast." The wolf's eyes met hers, and for a moment they seemed to shift from amber to a stormy gray, the color of the Alpha King's human gaze. Then it backed away, moving toward the shattered doorway once more. At the threshold, it turned to look at her one final time before disappearing into the darkness of the corridor, leaving her alone with the wild pounding of her heart and the first faint lightening of the sky outside the windows. Dawn was approaching. She had survived the night, but something told her the true test was only beginning. The first rays of sunlight crept through the windows, painting the destruction around Ella in shades of gold. She hadn't slept since the wolf's second visit, too wired with adrenaline and confusion to do more than pace the confines of her ruined chamber. The poker had been set aside, the vial of wolf's bane returned to her pocket unused. Her fingers kept reaching for her grandfather's pendant, seeking comfort in its familiar contours. She had survived the night, but what came next remained uncertain. Would the Alpha King honor his word? Would he spare her from whatever grim fate had befallen the others? And if he did, what would become of her in this palace of shadows and secrets? A soft knock at the remains of her door pulled her from her thoughts. She tensed, expecting Samuel, but the figure that appeared in the doorway was male, tall, and lean, with graying hair at his temples. "The Alpha King requests your presence in his study," he announced, his tone formal but not unkind. "I am Connor, his beta." Ella smoothed her wrinkled dress with trembling hands. "Now?" "Yes." Connor's gaze swept over the destruction of the room, something like respect flickering in his eyes when it returned to her face. "You may wish to—" He gestured vaguely at her appearance. She caught a glimpse of herself in a shard of mirror still hanging on the wall. Her pale blonde hair hung in tangled waves around her face, which was smudged with ash from the fire. Her dress was torn at the hem and shoulder, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked wild, feral, as though she'd begun to transform into something untamed herself. "No," she said, straightening her spine. "He can see me exactly as I am after what he put me through." Surprise flickered across Connor's face, quickly masked. "As you wish. Follow me, please." She trailed him through corridors of polished stone and gleaming wood, past servants who averted their eyes and guards who watched with thinly veiled curiosity. The palace was different in daylight, less menacing, but no less grand. Tapestries depicting the pack's history adorned the walls, interspersed with weapons mounted as displays. Windows overlooking the mountains allowed sunlight to stream across their path, warming the stone beneath her feet. After several minutes of walking in silence, they reached a set of double doors, carved with the pack's emblem, a wolf howling beneath a crescent moon. Two guards stood at attention outside, their expressions impassive. "Wait here," Connor instructed, slipping through the doors and closing them behind him. Ella stood alone in the corridor, acutely aware of the guards' sideways glances. Her hand found her pendant once more, drawing strength from it as she had through the long night. Whatever awaited her beyond those doors, she would face it with the same courage that had kept her alive thus far. The doors swung open, and Connor reappeared. "The Alpha King will see you now," he said, gesturing for her to enter. She stepped into a spacious chamber lined with bookshelves that reached from floor to ceiling. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, its surface scattered with maps and documents. Behind it, standing with his back to her, was the Alpha King. He wore simple clothing, a black tunic and dark trousers tucked into boots. But there was no mistaking the power that radiated from him, even at rest. His dark hair was damp, as if he'd recently bathed, and when he turned to face her, she saw that the scar along his jawline was more prominent in daylight, a pale line against his tanned skin. His eyes, storm gray just as she remembered, assessed her with the same intensity as the wolf's had. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Leave us," he finally said to Connor, his voice deep and controlled, so different from the growls and snarls of the night before. The beta bowed and retreated, closing the doors behind him with a soft click. They were alone. "You survived," Dominic stated, his expression unreadable. "I did," she replied, lifting her chin slightly, though not for lack of trying on your part. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "If I had been trying to kill you, Omega, you would not be standing here now." "Ella," she corrected. "My name is Ella, not Omega. And forgive me if I find your distinction about intent rather academic, considering the claw marks on the floor of my chamber." His eyes widened slightly, and she realized she had surprised him with her boldness. Good. Let him see that the night had changed her, that she would not cower before him, king or no. "Ella," he conceded, moving around the desk to stand before her. He was even taller than she remembered, forcing her to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "You're the first to survive the night." "So I gathered," she said, thinking of Samuel's words about the 6 Omegas who had died in that room. "Why? What purpose does this ritual serve?" Dominic's gaze shifted away from hers, landing on the window where morning light streamed in. "When I shift, I lose control. The beast takes over." His hands clenched at his sides. "I needed to know if anyone could reach me when that happens, could pull me back from the edge of losing myself completely. And the others couldn't," she surmised, "so they died." His expression hardened. "Yes." The casualness with which he admitted to their deaths sent a chill through her. "That's monstrous," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed again, surprising her. "It is. I am." He turned back to her, his eyes now cold and distant. "But what choice do I have? The shifts come more frequently now, triggered by anger, by stress, sometimes by nothing at all." "So you'll become like your uncle," she finished. "A tyrant, a killer." Shock registered on his face. "How do you know about my uncle?" She hesitated, weighing the risk of honesty against the danger of lies. "Samuel told me some of your history," she said, then withdrew his journal from her pocket, holding it out to him. "And I read this after your wolf destroyed the desk." She expected rage, perhaps even violence. Instead, he took the journal from her hand with careful movements, as if afraid of touching her accidentally. "And yet you still approach the wolf," he said quietly. "Knowing what I've done, what I'm capable of, you offered your hand to the beast." "I spoke to the man," she corrected, "not the beast." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of hope. He turned away, setting the journal on his desk, before facing her once more. "You called me by name," he said. "No one speaks my name to the wolf." "They're too afraid." "I'm afraid," he admitted. "I'd be a fool not to be," she replied, "but fear doesn't have to dictate our choices." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "No, it doesn't." He studied her with renewed interest. "What did Samuel tell you about me?" "That you lost your family to betrayal, that you've been losing yourself ever since." She met his gaze steadily. "That I'm the first Omega whose name you bothered to learn before locking them in that room." Dominic paced to the window, his movements carrying the same predatory grace as the wolf's. "I chose you because you were different," he said after a long silence. "The others at the selection, they reeked of ambition, of greed. Some feared me, others wanted my power, my crown." He turned to look at her over his shoulder. "But you smelled of rain and forest earth, of loneliness, of truth." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she remained silent, waiting. "You survived the night," he continued. "As promised, I'll spare you." He moved back to his desk, his expression shifting to one of cool detachment. "You'll be given quarters in the East Wing, away from the main court. You'll be safe there and free to return to your former life if you wish." "That's it?" she asked, disbelief coloring her voice. "A test, a reward, and dismissal?" His eyebrow arched slightly. "What more did you expect?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but not to be discarded after what happened between us." "What happened," he said coldly, "is that you survived an encounter with a monster. Nothing more." But there had been more. A connection. A moment of understanding when the wolf had pressed its muzzle against her palm. She had seen recognition in those amber eyes, had felt the man beneath the beast respond to her words, her presence. "You're lying," she said softly, "to me and to yourself." Anger flashed across his features, storm clouds gathering in his eyes. "Careful, Omega. You survived one night. Don't presume that grants you special privileges or insights." "It's Ella," she corrected again, refusing to be cowed by his sudden shift in demeanor. "And I'm not presuming anything. I'm observing." She took a step closer to his desk, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the controlled rhythm of his breathing. "You're afraid," she stated, "not of the wolf, but of what the wolf revealed to me." "And what was that?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Your loneliness," she said simply. "Your fear of being seen, truly seen, by another soul." Something cracked in his expression, a hairline fracture in the mask of the Alpha King. For a heartbeat, she glimpsed the wounded man beneath, the one who had lost everything and feared losing what little remained of himself. Then the mask slammed back into place. "You are dismissed," he said, his tone frigid. "Connor will show you to your quarters." She should have left then, should have been grateful for her life and the relative freedom he offered. But the memory of the wolf's gentle touch against her palm held her in place. "I can help you," she said, the words emerging before she could reconsider them. Dominic froze, his hands splayed across the desk. "What?" "I reached you last night when you were the wolf. I can do it again." She swallowed hard, wondering if she was signing her own death warrant even as she continued. "Let me help you find balance before you lose yourself completely." He stared at her as if she'd suggested setting the palace ablaze. "Why would you offer that? After what I put you through, what I've done to others." "Because I'm tired of being invisible," she said truthfully, "of having no purpose, no place where I truly belong." She touched her pendant, drawing strength from it one more time. "My grandfather told me that our weakness is our greatest strength. Maybe being overlooked my whole life has given me the ability to see others clearly, to recognize the truth behind the masks we all wear." Dominic's expression shifted through a series of emotions too rapid to track. Disbelief, suspicion, a flicker of something that might have been hope. "It's a convenient offer," he said finally, weariness evident in his tone. "One that keeps you close to power, to the throne." She couldn't help it. She laughed, the sound startling in the formal atmosphere of the study. "You think I want your crown, your power?" She shook her head. "I've spent my life being invisible, Dominic. The last thing I want is to stand in the glaring light of a throne." "Then what do you want?" he demanded. The question caught her off guard. What did she want? She had never been asked before, had never thought her desires mattered enough to consider. "Purpose," she said after a moment of reflection. "Connection. To be seen for who I am, not what I am." Dominic studied her, his gaze penetrating as if he could see through to her very soul. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy some inner question, for his posture relaxed slightly. "And if I refuse your offer?" he asked. "Then I'll leave," she said with a calm she didn't entirely feel. "Return to being the forgotten Omega of the Silver Paw Pack, and you'll continue your search for someone who can reach the man behind the beast." He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Outside, clouds passed over the sun, casting the study into momentary shadow before brightness returned. "There will be rules," he said finally, his voice low. "Boundaries that cannot be crossed. The wolf is dangerous, unpredictable. I cannot guarantee your safety." Hope bloomed in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. "I understand." "Do you?" His gaze sharpened. 6 Omegas have died, Ella. 6 souls who thought they could tame the beast. "I don't want to tame you," she countered. "I want to help you find balance. There's a difference." Something shifted in his eyes, recognition perhaps, or the first tentative stirrings of trust. "Very well," he said, the words seeming to cost him considerable effort. "We will try it your way. But at the first sign of danger, you will remove yourself from my presence. Is that understood?" She nodded, relief and trepidation mingling in her veins. "Understood." "Good." He straightened, the mantle of the Alpha King settling over his shoulders once more. "Connor will show you to more suitable quarters. Rest today. We'll begin tonight." As if summoned by his name, Connor appeared at the door. Dominic nodded dismissal, already turning his attention to the papers scattered across his desk. She followed Connor from the study, her mind reeling with the implications of what had just transpired. She had offered herself as a tether to the Alpha King's humanity, a beacon to guide the man back from the beast. It was dangerous, perhaps suicidal, but it was also the first time in her life she had been truly seen, truly needed. As Connor led her through the palace to her new quarters, servants and courtiers whispered behind their hands, their gazes curious and sometimes hostile. News traveled quickly, it seemed. The unremarkable Omega from the selection had survived the night in the Alpha King's chamber and now walked the palace halls with her head held high. She touched her grandfather's pendant, feeling its familiar contours beneath her fingers. "Our weakness is our greatest strength," she whispered to herself, a mantra to carry her forward into the uncertain future that awaited. Behind them, a howl rose from somewhere deep within the palace, mournful, lonely, and filled with a hunger that transcended mere physical need. The sound followed her down the corridor, a reminder of the beast that waited for nightfall and the man trapped within who had, against all odds, begun to hope. Her new chambers were luxurious compared to anything she'd ever known. A spacious bedroom with a canopied bed, a sitting area with plush chairs arranged before a fireplace, and a private bathing chamber with a copper tub large enough for two. Windows overlooked the forest, offering a view of the mountains beyond, now gilded with afternoon sunlight. After bathing and changing into a simple blue dress provided by a nervous maid, she spent the remainder of the day exploring her new surroundings and preparing herself mentally for the night ahead. No one had told her exactly what to expect, whether Dominic would come to her in human form first, or if she would face the wolf directly once more. As twilight approached, her anxiety grew. She paced the length of her chamber, fingers toying with her grandfather's pendant, rehearsing what she might say to either the man or the beast. When a knock finally came at her door, the sky outside had deepened to indigo, stars beginning to emerge like scattered diamonds. Connor stood in the corridor, his expression grave. "The Alpha King requests your presence in the throne room," he said. He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "He's fighting the shift already, be careful." She nodded, swallowing against the dryness in her throat. "Thank you." The throne room was vast, its ceiling vaulted and supported by columns carved to resemble ancient trees. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the stone floor and the massive throne that dominated the far end of the chamber. The room was empty, save for one figure, Dominic, pacing before the throne like a caged animal, his movements jerky and unnatural. He spun to face her as she entered, his eyes already beginning to change from storm gray to amber. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and the tendons in his neck stood out as if he were physically restraining himself from some violent action. "You shouldn't have come," he growled, his voice deeper than it had been in his study, rough around the edges. She approached slowly, keeping her movements calm and deliberate. "I made a promise." He backed away, putting the throne between them. "It's happening faster tonight. I can't—" He broke off with a grimace, his hands curling into claws at his sides. "The wolf wants out." "Then let it out," she said, continuing her careful advance. "I'm not afraid." "You should be." His body convulsed, a shudder running from his shoulders to his feet. "The wolf remembers you. It wants—" Another convulsion cut off his words. "What does it want?" she asked, now standing directly before the throne, close enough to see the pain etched in the lines around his eyes, the strain of holding back the transformation. "You," he rasped. "It wants you." Before she could respond, he doubled over with a cry that morphed halfway through into a howl. Bones cracked and reformed. Muscles rippled beneath his skin, and dark fur erupted along his spine. The transformation was both beautiful and terrible to witness. The man becoming beast before her eyes, caught in the agony of metamorphosis. She stood her ground, though every instinct screamed at her to run. This was why she had stayed, why she had offered her help. If she fled now, any chance of reaching the man within the beast would be lost. When the transformation completed, the massive black wolf stood where Dominic had been, shaking out its pelt as if settling into the new form. Its amber eyes found her immediately, intelligent and hungry. "Hello again," she said softly, fighting to keep her voice steady. The wolf approached slowly, its massive head lowered, hackles slightly raised. There was recognition in its gaze, but also wariness, as if unsure of its welcome. She extended her hand, palm up, as she had done the night before. "I'm here, Dominic. I'm not going anywhere." The wolf circled her, its movements more fluid than they had been during their previous encounters. This time, there was less aggression in its posture, more curiosity. "You're more in control tonight," she observed, turning to keep her eyes on the wolf. "You remember me, don't you? Remember that I spoke to you not as a beast, but as a man?" The wolf paused in its circling, ears pricked forward at the sound of her voice. It sniffed the air, then approached more directly, its muzzle inches from her outstretched hand. "That's it," she encouraged. "You don't have to fight against the wolf, Dominic. It's part of you. The problem isn't the transformation, it's the separation. The man and the wolf at war with each other instead of in harmony."
The wolf pressed its muzzle against her palm, the touch gentle despite the power evident in every line of its massive form. A tremor ran through its body, and for a moment she thought it might shift back to human form. Instead, it leaned more heavily against her hand, as if seeking comfort or reassurance. Emboldened, she moved her fingers to scratch behind its ears, the way one might with a large dog. The wolf tensed momentarily, then relaxed into the touch, a rumbling sound emanating from its chest that was closer to a purr than a growl. "There you are," she whispered, a smile tugging at her lips. "Not so fearsome now, are you?" The wolf huffed as if offended by the suggestion, but made no move to pull away from her touch. Instead, it circled around her and settled on the stone floor, looking up with an expectant expression. Understanding what it wanted, she sat beside the wolf, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from its massive body. For a time, they simply existed in each other's presence, the silence of the throne room broken only by the wolf's steady breathing and the occasional distant sound from elsewhere in the palace. "My grandfather used to tell me stories," she said eventually, her voice soft in the stillness. Tales of the first werewolves who found balance not by fighting their dual nature, but by embracing it. The wolf and the human, he said, are not enemies. They're two halves of the same soul. The wolf's ears twitched, its amber eyes fixed on her face as if drinking in every word. "He told me that the strongest alphas were those who could speak with their wolves, not just command them." She hesitated, then added, "I think he would have liked you, Dominic. Both sides of you." The wolf made a soft whining sound, resting its massive head on its paws. "I know you're afraid," she continued, reaching out to stroke its fur. "Afraid of losing control, of becoming like your uncle, but fighting against your nature only makes the divide deeper." She thought of the journal entries, the growing frequency of uncontrolled shifts. You need to find harmony, not dominance. As the night deepened around them, she continued to talk, sharing stories of her childhood, of her grandfather's wisdom, of her life as the overlooked Omega. The wolf listened with surprising attentiveness, its body gradually relaxing until it was pressed against her side, a living furnace in the cool air of the throne room. Hours passed this way until the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. The wolf stirred, lifting its head to look toward the windows. "It's almost morning," she said, following its gaze. "Will you shift back now?" The wolf rose to its feet, stretching in a motion that reminded her of a cat. It padded a short distance away, then turned to look at her over its shoulder. The message was clear. "Stay where you are." She remained seated as the transformation began in reverse, fur receding, limbs lengthening, the wolf's form twisting and reshaping into that of a man. Unlike the shift from human to wolf, this transformation seemed less painful, more fluid, as if the return to human form came more naturally. When it was complete, Dominic knelt on the stone floor, his back to her, breathing heavily. He was unclothed, his bare shoulders rising and falling with each breath, the muscles of his back defined in the early morning light. "There's a robe behind the throne," he said after a moment, his voice husky but steady. She retrieved the garment and brought it to him, keeping her eyes averted as he stood and wrapped it around himself. When she dared to look at his face, she was struck by the clarity in his eyes, the storm-gray irises free of the haunted shadows she had seen the day before. "You stayed," he said, a note of wonder in his voice. "I told you I would." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "So you did." He studied her, his head tilting slightly. "You spoke to the wolf about balance, about harmony. You remember everything?" He nodded. "For the first time I was present, aware. The wolf and I, we were—" He seemed to struggle for the right words. "In sync," she supplied. "Not fighting for control." "Yes." His expression grew thoughtful. "Your grandfather's stories about werewolves finding balance. I've never heard those tales before." She smiled. "He had unusual ideas about many things. The elders of our pack considered him eccentric at best, dangerous at worst. Yet he seems to have understood something that has eluded our scholars for generations." Dominic gestured toward a bench along the wall, and they moved to sit, a comfortable distance between them. "Tell me more about him." As the sun rose fully, painting the throne room in shades of gold and amber, they talked, truly talked, as equals rather than king and subject. She shared more of her grandfather's wisdom, his unconventional beliefs about werewolf nature,
his insistence that true strength came from harmony rather than dominance. In return, Dominic spoke of his childhood, of the weight of expectations placed upon him as the eldest son, of his struggle to reconcile the man his father wanted him to be with the man he believed himself to be. "After my family was killed," he said, his voice low, "the wolf took over during the battle with my uncle. For 3 days I was lost to the rage, the grief. When I finally shifted back, the throne was mine, but something inside me had broken, the balance, the harmony. It was gone." "And you've been trying to regain control ever since," she said, understanding dawning. "But control isn't what you need, it's acceptance." He looked at her with new eyes, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "You understand, don't you? What it's like to be at war with yourself." "In a different way, perhaps," she admitted. "As an Omega in a world that values only strength and dominance, I've spent my life believing I was less than I am, invisible, forgettable." "I see you, Ella," he'd said softly. "I've seen you from the moment you stood in that clearing, refusing to play the game the others played." Something warm unfurled in her chest at his words, a sensation so foreign it took her a moment to recognize it as belonging. "What happens now?" she asked, voicing the question that hung between them. Dominic was silent for a long moment, his gaze thoughtful. "More nights like this one, I hope. The wolf is calmer when you're near, more manageable." He hesitated, then added, "If you're willing." "I am," she said, perhaps too quickly. But it was true. For the first time in her life, she had found purpose, connection, a place where her supposed weakness had become strength. "On one condition," she added. His eyebrow arched slightly. "Which is?" "No more tests," she said firmly. "No more locked rooms or trials by survival. We work together as equals." Surprise flickered across his features, followed by something that might have been respect. "Agreed." Outside, the palace was awakening, servants moving through distant corridors, guards changing shifts at the gates. Soon the throne room would no longer be their private sanctuary. "The council will have questions," Dominic said, rising to his feet. "About you, about your presence here." "Let them question," she replied, standing as well. "I'm not afraid of their judgment." The ghost of a smile returned to his lips. "No, I don't suppose you are." He extended his hand to her, not as the Alpha King to a lowly Omega, but as one person to another. "Until tonight, Ella." She placed her hand in his, feeling the strength in his grip, the warmth of his skin against hers. "Until tonight, Dominic." As they parted at the throne room doors, the morning sun streaming through the windows behind them, she touched her grandfather's pendant one final time. "Our weakness is our greatest strength." In being overlooked, she had learned to truly see. In being forgotten, she had become unforgettable to the one person who mattered. The Alpha King had challenged her to survive the night. Instead, she had shown him how to truly live. A commotion in the corridor caught their attention. A young guard ran toward them, his face pale with urgency. He skidded to a halt before Dominic, dropping to one knee. "Your Majesty," he panted, "forgive the intrusion, but Elder Thaddeus demands an audience. He says it cannot wait." Dominic's expression hardened. The Alpha King replacing the man she had just spoken with. "What is his purpose?" "He would not say, sire, only that it concerns the Dark Claw Pack and—" The guard's eyes flicked briefly to Ella. "Your unusual choice at the selection." She felt Dominic stiffen beside her, his posture becoming more rigid. "Tell Elder Thaddeus I will meet with him and the council in 1 hour, not before." The guard bowed and hurried away. Dominic turned to her, his eyes troubled. "It seems our respite was brief. The politics of the pack never rest for long." "What will you tell them?" she asked. "The truth," he replied, though she could see the calculation in his gaze. "Or enough of it to satisfy them. You should prepare yourself, Ella. The council will not easily accept an Omega in a position of influence, especially one they've long overlooked." She lifted her chin. "I've been underestimated my entire life. I'm quite used to it." A flicker of admiration crossed his face. "Nevertheless, we must proceed carefully. The Dark Claw Pack has been pushing for an alliance through mating. Your presence threatens that arrangement." "Politics," she murmured, understanding dawning. "You were supposed to choose someone else, someone who would cement a treaty." "Catherine," he confirmed, "daughter of the Dark Claw Alpha. The council has been negotiating the terms for months." The implications settled heavily on her shoulders. Her survival, her connection with Dominic, these were not just personal victories but political complications that could affect the stability of both packs. "I should go with you to the council meeting," she said.
Dominic shook his head. Not yet. Let me handle Thaddeus first. Return to your chambers and rest. Jackson will come to you later. He's trustworthy, despite his gruff exterior, and can tell you more about the politics at play. Jackson, the old war veteran? She asked, surprised. He's more than that, Dominic said with a cryptic smile. Much more. Trust him, Ella. Few others in this palace deserve it. With that, he turned and strode down the corridor, the robe billowing behind him like a cloak, every inch the Alpha King preparing for battle. She watched him go, aware that the simple connection they had formed in the throne room was already being tested by the complicated web of pack politics. The challenge of helping Dominic find balance with his wolf suddenly seemed straightforward compared to navigating the treacherous currents of power that swirled through the palace. As she made her way back to her chambers, she noticed the whispers growing bolder, the stares more direct. Servants paused in their duties to watch her pass. Guards straightened as she approached. She was no longer invisible, but neither was she accepted. She was something new, an anomaly in their ordered world, and that made her dangerous. In her chambers, she found a tray of food waiting, fresh bread, fruit, and smoked meat. She realized she hadn't eaten since before the selection ceremony and fell upon the meal with ravenous hunger. As she ate by the window, watching the morning activity in the courtyard below, a knock sounded at her door. Too soon for Jackson, she thought, instantly wary. "Who is it?" she called. "Samuel," came the reply. "May I enter?" She crossed to open the door. The old healer stood in the corridor, his eyes bright with poorly concealed excitement. "You did it," he said without preamble, stepping past her into the room. "You reached him." "Word travels fast," she observed, closing the door. Samuel waved a dismissive hand. "In a place like this, walls have ears and shadows have eyes. But never mind that. Tell me what happened." She described the night in the throne room, the way the wolf had seemed more aware, more in control, and how Dominic had remembered everything upon shifting back. Samuel listened intently, nodding at times, his expression growing more animated. When she finished, he reached into his satchel and withdrew a worn leather book. "I knew it," he whispered, almost to himself. The legends were true. What legends? The old man opened his book, revealing pages of ancient text and illustrations. The Blackwood family has always struggled with the divide between human and wolf, a curse that goes back generations. But the old stories speak of those with the gift of sight, those who could bridge the gap between man and beast. He turned the book toward her, pointing to an illustration of a woman with a crescent moon pendant standing before a massive wolf. They were called the Moonseers, and they were hunted nearly to extinction centuries ago because the ruling alphas feared their power. Ella's fingers went to her grandfather's pendant. "My grandfather never mentioned this." "He wouldn't have," Samuel said, "to protect you. The last known Moonseer was executed just 50 years ago, a woman named Eleanor like you." "My grandmother," Ella whispered, pieces falling into place. "I was named for her." Samuel nodded gravely. "Your grandfather must have recognized the signs in you and kept them hidden. The ability to truly see a person's inner self, to speak to the wolf directly. These are Moonseer traits. But why would they be hunted? If they could help alphas find balance?" "Because balance means shared power," Samuel interrupted. "And most alphas prefer absolute control. A wolf that is in harmony with its human side cannot be driven purely by dominance and aggression. It becomes tempered, wiser, less useful as a weapon of war." She thought of Dominic's father, known for his brutal reign, and his uncle, whose brief rule had been marked by bloodshed. Would they have welcomed someone who could temper their wolves? "Dominic is different," she said, half to herself. "He wants to be," Samuel corrected. "But the pull of tradition, of expectation, is strong. The council will fight to preserve the old ways, and the Dark Claw Pack will see your influence as a threat to their power. You are in more danger now than you were facing the wolf last night." A chill settled in her stomach. What should I do? Samuel closed the book and returned it to his satchel. "Trust your instincts. They've guided you this far, and be careful whom you trust. There are few in this palace who would welcome a Moonseer's return." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. The cycle of the moon affects your abilities. Tonight is the waxing crescent, when your power is growing. By the full moon, you'll be at your strongest. Use that time wisely." With that cryptic advice, he left, leaving her with more questions than answers and a growing sense that the path ahead was far more perilous than she had imagined. She returned to the window, watching the palace guards drill in the courtyard below.
Somewhere in the council chambers, Dominic was facing Elder Thaddeus and his political machinations. Somewhere in the shadows, others watched and waited, seeing her not as the forgotten Omega, but as something much more dangerous, a catalyst for change in a world resistant to it. She closed her fingers around her pendant, feeling its familiar weight. "Our weakness is our greatest strength," she whispered, a reminder and a promise. The winds of change were blowing through the silver paw pack, and she stood at the center of the storm. The knock came just after midday. Ella had spent the morning poring over the implications of Samuel's revelations, alternating between staring out the window at the mountains beyond and pacing the confines of her chamber. She was a moonseer, descendant of a lineage nearly hunted to extinction, possessing abilities she'd barely begun to understand. The pendant around her neck was not just her grandfather's final gift, but a symbol of her heritage, one he had kept secret to protect her. "Enter!" she called, expecting Samuel returning with more information, or perhaps Connor with a summons from Dominic. Instead, the weathered face of Jackson appeared, his sharp eyes taking in the room before settling on her. The old warrior stepped inside and closed the door firmly behind him. "So you're the one who tamed the beast," he said without preamble, his voice gruff, but not unkind. "I didn't tame anything," she replied. "I simply spoke to the man inside it." A smile creased his scarred face. "That's more than anyone else has managed." He moved to the window, positioning himself where he could see both her and the courtyard below. "The Alpha King said you should know me. He's right, though not in the way you might think." She studied him carefully. Jackson had always been kind to her, teaching her survival skills when others dismissed her as worthless. But now she saw him with new eyes, the way he carried himself, alert yet at ease, the quiet confidence of a predator who didn't need to display his strength. "You're more than a war veteran," she said, echoing Dominic's words. "I've been many things," he acknowledged. "Soldier, spy, protector. Your grandfather was my friend." The mention of her grandfather sent a jolt through her. "You knew him?" Jackson nodded. "William was one of the last to understand the old ways. We fought together in the border wars, survived things that would have broken lesser men. When your grandmother was executed for being a moonseer, he came to me for help." Ella sank into a chair, her legs suddenly weak. "My grandmother was executed? Samuel mentioned it, but—" 50 years ago, Jackson confirmed, his eyes darkening with the memory. "Your grandfather was away on a hunting expedition. The old Alpha, Dominic's grandfather, ordered the execution personally. When William returned, he found her gone, and you just a babe in arms. Eleanor had hidden you with a wet nurse before they took her." "Why?" she whispered, her hand going to her pendant. "Why kill her?" "Fear," Jackson said simply. "The Blackwoods have carried the curse of unbalanced shifting for generations. They've spilled rivers of blood because of it, but they prefer the power it gives them, raw, untempered aggression. Your grandmother could have helped them find balance, but that would have weakened their hold over the pack. So they eliminated her and any others with her gift." "But my grandfather," she pressed, "how did he escape?" "I helped him disappear into the Omega quarters with you. We changed your names, obscured your lineage. William played the eccentric old man, harmless and half-mad. No one would suspect him of harboring the last moonseer." His weathered face softened. "He raised you to survive, to blend in, to be overlooked. It was the only way to keep you safe." The weight of this revelation settled over her. All those years of feeling invisible, worthless, they had been a deliberate shield, a camouflage crafted by her grandfather to protect her from those who would destroy her for what she was. "And now?" she asked. "Does Dominic know what I am?" Jackson shook his head. "Not yet. Samuel suspects, but he's kept his theories to himself. Dominic only knows you can reach his wolf in a way no one else has managed." "But the council," she began. "We'll see the threat you represent," Jackson finished. "Especially Elder Thaddeus. He served under the old Alpha, helped hunt down the moonseers. If he discovers what you are—" He left the implication hanging. "Then why reveal myself at all?" she questioned. "Why not continue as I have been?" Jackson's gaze sharpened. "Because the Dark Claw Pack is moving against us. They've been waiting for signs of the Blackwood madness to justify invasion. Dominic's father gave them plenty, and now they watch his son for the same weakness." He leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. "The wolves of Dark Claw follow the old god Fenrir, who taught that dominance is the only true strength.
Their alpha, Lord Nathaniel, has been gathering power for decades. He wants the Silver Paw territories, and he'll use Dominic's struggle with his wolf as the excuse he needs. That's why they arranged the marriage with Catherine, Ella realized, to gain a foothold. Exactly, Jackson nodded. Catherine is not just any alpha's daughter. She's been trained from birth to exploit the Blackwood curse. Her mission is to push Dominic over the edge, to trigger his wolf at the most damaging moment. The implications made her blood run cold. So when I appeared instead, you became a threat to their entire strategy, Jackson confirmed. Elder Thaddeus is meeting with Dominic now, demanding he renounce you and honor the arrangement with Catherine. The council is split, half supporting the alliance, half fearing Darkclaw's true intentions. Ella rose, pacing the room as she processed this information. And Dominic, what does he want? A shadow of a smile crossed Jackson's face. For the first time in years, the Alpha King slept without nightmares. He woke remembering what it was like to be in harmony with his wolf. What do you think he wants? Her heart quickened at the thought, but she pushed the feeling aside. This wasn't about her or Dominic's personal desires. It was about the survival of the pack, about politics and power and ancient curses. What happened in the council meeting? She asked. Thaddeus overplayed his hand, Jackson said with grim satisfaction. He threatened Dominic, suggesting that rejecting the Darkclaw alliance proves he's succumbing to the Blackwood madness. Dominic responded by pinning him to the wall and reminding him who the Alpha is. He chuckled at the memory. The old wolf pissed himself, but fear makes men dangerous, and Thaddeus has allies, which is why I'm here, to teach you to protect yourself. Protect myself? She repeated. Jackson moved to the center of the room, gesturing for her to join him. Your abilities are awakening, but they're unfocused. You need to learn control, both for your safety and to help Dominic. The next hours passed in intensive training. Jackson taught her to center herself, to find the quiet place within where her awareness could expand beyond normal senses. He showed her fighting stances, designed for someone of her size, movements that used an opponent's strength against them. Most importantly, he taught her to recognize the signs of a werewolf about to lose control. The eyes change first, he explained, followed by the hands. If you see claws beginning to form, you have seconds to intervene. As the afternoon waned toward evening, a pounding at the door interrupted their training. Connor burst in without waiting for permission, his face pale with urgency. You need to come, he said to Ella. Now. What's happened? Jackson demanded. Samuel, Connor replied grimly. He's been attacked. They raced through the palace corridors, servants and guards scattering before the beta's urgent pace. Connor led them to the healing chambers in the east wing, where the scent of blood and medicinal herbs hung heavy in the air. Samuel lay on a narrow bed, his robes torn and stained with blood. His breathing was shallow, face ashen beneath a sheen of sweat. Deep claw marks raked across his chest and throat, barely missing the vital arteries. Dominic stood beside the bed, his expression thunderous. When he saw Ella enter, something in his face shifted. Relief, perhaps, or resolve. Who did this? She asked, moving to Samuel's side. The old healer's eyes fluttered open at the sound of her voice. He was found in the archives, Dominic answered, his voice tight with controlled rage. Among the oldest records of pack history. Samuel's hand twitched, reaching weakly toward her. She took it gently, leaning closer to hear his labored whisper. The book, he rasped. They took the book. What book? She asked. Moonseer Histories, he managed before a coughing fit overtook him, flecks of blood appearing on his lips. They know what you are. Dominic's head snapped up, his gaze locking with hers. What is he talking about? What are you? Before she could answer, Connor appeared at the door. Your Majesty, Elder Thaddeus requests your immediate presence. Darkclaw representatives have arrived early for the new moon feast. Lord Nathaniel is with them. A muscle ticked in Dominic's jaw. Tell them I'll be there shortly. Sire, Connor hesitated. They've brought Catherine. They're insisting on formalizing the betrothal tonight. Dominic's eyes flashed dangerously, amber beginning to bleed into the stormy gray. Jackson moved subtly closer to Ella, his posture protective. Stay with Samuel, Dominic instructed her, visibly struggling to control his rising anger. Don't leave this room until I return. To Connor, he added, double the guard on the healing chambers. With that, he strode from the room, every line of his body tense with barely contained fury. Connor followed, leaving Ella and Jackson with the injured healer. He's shifting, Jackson observed quietly. The wolf is close to the surface. I should be with him, she said, worry gnawing at her. If he loses control in front of the Dark Claw representatives? That's exactly what they want, Jackson replied. They're trying to provoke him, to display the Blackwood madness in front of witnesses. His expression grew grim. And now they know about you. The attack on Samuel wasn't random. They sought information about moonseers. Samuel stirred, his breathing labored. The curse, he whispered. Tell her. The curse. Ella leaned closer. What about it, Samuel? Not natural, the old healer managed. Placed on them by a moonseer. Jackson inhaled sharply. What? Centuries ago, Samuel continued weakly. A Blackwood alpha murdered a moonseer's mate. In revenge, she cursed his line. To forever war with their wolves. Only a moonseer can lift it. Ella's mind raced with the implications. The Blackwood curse wasn't just a genetic predisposition or a metaphor. It was a literal curse placed by one of her ancestors. And according to Samuel, only someone with her bloodline could end it. That's why they hunted us, she realized, not just because we could help alphas find balance, but because you could break the curse entirely, Jackson finished, ending the source of their power. A commotion in the corridor outside drew their attention. The door burst open, and Connor staggered in, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. They've challenged him, he gasped. Victor, Dominic's cousin, claims he's unfit to rule due to the madness. They're forcing a dominance fight. Victor? Jackson's expression darkened. He's been in exile for years. Darkclaw brought him back, Connor explained. Lord Nathaniel claims Victor is of sound mind, uncorrupted by the Blackwood curse. It's a setup, Jackson growled. Victor has always been Nathaniel's puppet. Ella's heart pounded. Where is Dominic now? The ceremonial arena, Connor replied. The challenge must be answered immediately according to pack law. She was moving before he finished speaking, racing for the door. Jackson caught her arm. Wait, you can't just burst in there. They'll kill you. They'll kill him, she countered. You said it yourself. They want to provoke his wolf, to make him lose control in front of everyone. I can help him. Not without preparation, Jackson insisted. He turned to Samuel. The ritual. Does she have time to learn it? The old healer nodded weakly. Simple, but requires blood. Her blood. His blood. Under moonlight. Jackson released her arm and moved to Samuel's cabinet of remedies. He returned with a small silver knife and a vial of dark liquid. This is essence of moonflower, he explained, pressing both into her hands. Mix it with your blood and his during the ritual. It will strengthen the connection. What ritual? She asked, confusion and urgency warring within her. The binding, Samuel whispered. Soul to soul, wolf to moonseer. Speak the words as you share blood. The rest will follow. Jackson knelt before her, his expression grave. Ella, listen carefully. This ritual will bind you to Dominic permanently. Your souls, your life forces, intertwined. If he dies, you will feel it. If you die, he will too. It is not a decision to make lightly. The weight of his words settled over her. A permanent bond, a life tied to another's. Yet in her heart, she knew there was no other choice. Not just for the pack's sake, but for Dominic's, and yes, for her own. What are the words? She asked. Samuel's voice was barely audible now. By blood shared, by moon witnessed, I bind my sight to your soul, your wolf to my heart. What was broken, made whole. What was cursed, redeemed. She committed the words to memory, tucking the knife and vial into her pocket. I need to get to the arena. Not through the main corridors, Connor warned. Thaddeus has his people watching for you. Jackson moved to the far wall of the healing chamber and pressed a concealed lever. A section of paneling slid aside, revealing a narrow passage. The old escape tunnels, he explained. They run throughout the palace. This one will take you near the arena. He handed her a small iron key. For the exit gate. She stepped toward the dark passage, then paused, turning back to Samuel. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. The old healer managed a faint smile. Go. Save our king. The passageway was cramped and musty, forcing her to navigate by touch along rough stone walls slick with moisture. Rats scurried at her approach, and cobwebs clung to her hair and skin. The journey seemed endless, each step taking her deeper into the mountain upon which the palace was built. Finally, she felt a draft of fresher air and saw faint light ahead. The passage ended at a rusted iron door.
She fumbled with the key Jackson had given her, the lock reluctantly yielding with a screech of protest. She emerged into a shadowy alcove behind the ceremonial arena, the roar of the assembled pack washing over her like a physical wave. Peering cautiously from her hiding place, she saw hundreds of werewolves gathered in tiered stone seating around a circular pit. Torches lined the walls, their flames dancing in the evening breeze, casting long shadows across the expectant faces. At the far end of the arena, a group sat apart on elevated thrones, the Darkclaw delegation. Even from a distance, she could identify Lord Nathaniel by his impressive silver-streaked black mane and the arrogant tilt of his head. Beside him sat a young woman of startling beauty, her dark hair elaborately braided with gold threads, her expression one of calculated innocence. Catherine, Ella realized, the intended bride, watching with barely concealed anticipation. In the center of the arena stood two men, circling each other warily. Dominic, stripped to the waist, his muscled torso gleaming in the torchlight. And facing him, a slightly shorter man with the same dark hair but a leaner build, Victor, his exiled cousin, returned to challenge for the throne. "The terms are set," Elder Thaddeus announced, his voice carrying across the arena. "This challenge will determine the true alpha of Silver Paw. Should Victor prevail, the alliance with Darkclaw will proceed as arranged." Lord Nathaniel rose, his deep voice resonating with authority. "Let it be witnessed that this challenge is sanctioned by pack law. The victor will be acknowledged by all present as the rightful Alpha King." A murmur ran through the crowd. This was no ordinary dominance fight. It was a coup disguised as tradition, with the Darkclaw pack standing ready to legitimize the outcome. Ella scanned the arena, noting Jackson's absence. Connor stood at one entrance, his posture tense, but his expression carefully neutral. Of Samuel there was no sign. The old healer was likely still recovering from his wounds. Her attention returned to Dominic as Victor began to circle more aggressively. She could see the strain in Dominic's face, the effort it took to keep his wolf contained. His eyes flickered between gray and amber, his hands clenching and unclenching as he fought for control. "What's wrong, cousin?" Victor taunted, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Afraid your beast will show itself? We all know the madness runs in your blood, just like your father." Dominic remained silent, but Ella could see the taunt had struck home. The amber was winning in his eyes, his breathing becoming more ragged. "I hear you've taken a new pet," Victor continued, gesturing toward the council seats where Ella would normally be expected to sit. "Some worthless Omega no one else wanted. Did she warm your bed before you killed her too?" A growl rumbled from Dominic's chest, vibrating across the arena. The crowd hushed, sensing the shift in energy. "There it is," Victor smiled cruelly. "The beast emerges. Show them, Dominic. Show them all what you really are." Ella knew she had to act. Victor was deliberately provoking Dominic, pushing him toward transformation in front of the assembled packs. If he shifted now, in rage rather than control, it would confirm everything they claimed about the Blackwood madness. She slipped from her hiding place, skirting the edge of the arena. A guard moved to intercept her, but Connor appeared suddenly at his side, murmuring something that made the man step back. Victor lunged without warning, claws already extended, raking across Dominic's chest in a spray of blood. Dominic staggered, his eyes now fully amber, a snarl twisting his features. The transformation was beginning, bones shifting beneath skin, muscles contorting. "Stop!" Ella's voice cut through the arena's bloodthirsty roar. She stepped into the fighting pit, placing herself between the two men. A hush fell over the crowd. Victor froze mid-attack, surprise momentarily overriding his aggression. Dominic's transformation paused, his wolf responding to her voice, even as his human mind struggled to comprehend her presence. "What is this?" Lord Nathaniel demanded, rising from his seat. "Remove that Omega from the sacred circle." "No," she replied, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent arena. "This fight is a sham. Victor challenges not for the good of the pack, but as your puppet." She pointed directly at the Darkclaw Alpha, heedless of protocol or consequence. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one addressed an Alpha so directly, certainly not an Omega. "How dare you!" Catherine rose beside her father, outrage twisting her perfect features. "This worthless female should be whipped for her insolence." Ella ignored them, turning to face Dominic.
His transformation had halted, but he remained caught between forms, eyes glowing amber, partial claws extended, muscles bulging unnaturally beneath his skin. "Dominic," she said softly, taking a step toward him. "Look at me. See me." His gaze locked with hers, recognition flickering behind the bestial rage. "This isn't what you are," she continued, reaching slowly for her pendant. "The wolf is part of you, not your enemy. Remember last night. Remember how it felt to be in harmony." A tremor ran through his body. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she approached the half-transformed Alpha King, showing no fear despite the claws that could tear her apart with a single swipe. "Enough of this farce!" Thaddeus shouted. "Guards, remove her!" No one moved. Every eye was fixed on the tableau in the center of the arena. The forgotten Omega standing before the shifting Alpha King, her hand now extended toward him. "Kill her, Dominic," Victor urged, circling to the side. "Show everyone what the Blackwood curse truly means. Prove me right." Ella's fingers closed around her pendant. The ancient symbol seemed to warm beneath her touch, pulsing with an energy she'd never noticed before. "I see you," she said to Dominic. Her voice meant only for him, though it carried in the hushed arena. "Both sides of you, the man and the wolf, both worthy, both needed." She drew the silver knife Jackson had given her, causing a ripple of alarm through the crowd. Victor tensed, preparing to spring. But instead of attacking, she drew the blade across her palm, blood welling crimson in the torchlight. "By blood shared," she began, the ancient words rising to her lips as if she'd always known them. She reached for Dominic's hand, the one partially transformed into a claw, and pressed her bleeding palm against his. "By moon witnessed." The waxing crescent moon seemed to brighten overhead, its light suddenly more intense than the surrounding torches. "I bind my sight to your soul," she continued, feeling something stir within her, a power she hadn't known she possessed. "Your wolf to my heart." Dominic's eyes widened as their joined blood began to glow with a silvery light. The transformation that had gripped him neither progressed nor receded, but somehow harmonized. Man and wolf, existing simultaneously rather than fighting for dominance. "What is happening?" someone whispered from the crowd. "What is she doing to him?" Ella reached into her pocket with her free hand and uncorked the vial of moonflower essence. She poured it over their joined hands, the liquid hissing as it mingled with their blood. "What was broken, made whole," she declared, her voice growing stronger. "What was cursed, redeemed." A shockwave of silver light exploded from their joined hands, radiating outward in a silent concussion that swept through the arena. Ella felt something lock into place inside her, a connection, a bond that transcended physical touch. She could feel Dominic's heart beating alongside her own, could sense the wolf within him, not as a separate entity, but as an integrated part of his soul. And she could see, truly see, the web of intentions and alliances surrounding them. Victor's hatred and jealousy, burning toxic green. Thaddeus's fear and prejudice, a sickly yellow. Lord Nathaniel's cold ambition, midnight blue and razor sharp. Catherine's calculated manipulation, crimson with hunger for power. But most of all, she saw Dominic, his soul laid bare to her sight. The pain of loss, the burden of the crown, the fear of becoming what he hated most. And beneath it all, a core of unwavering strength, of honor, of compassion that the curse had never managed to corrupt. "Moonseer!" Lord Nathaniel hissed, recognition and hatred twisting his features. "She's a moonseer!" The word rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Older pack members drew back in superstitious fear. Younger ones looked confused, the term unfamiliar to them. "Kill her!" Thaddeus shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "Kill her now before she completes the binding!" Victor leapt toward them, claws extended for Ella's unprotected back. But before he could reach her, Dominic moved, faster than seemed possible, yet with perfect control. He intercepted his cousin mid-air, catching him by the throat with a partially transformed hand. "You will not touch her," Dominic growled, his voice deeper than human, but articulate, controlled. His eyes glowed amber, but there was no madness in them, only clarity and purpose. He threw Victor aside as if he weighed nothing, the challenger crashing into the arena wall with bone-crushing force. Victor slumped to the ground, unconscious or worse. Dominic turned to face the assembled packs, his form settling into something new.
neither fully human nor fully wolf, but a controlled blend of both. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of the Alpha King, but with an otherworldly resonance that silenced even the whispers. "The challenge is answered," he declared, "and more than the challenge, the curse." He raised his hand, still joined with Ella's, their mingled blood now shimmering with moonlight. "For generations, the Blackwood line has been tormented by what we thought was madness, the inability to find harmony between man and wolf. Tonight, that curse is broken." Lord Nathaniel rose to his feet, fury distorting his aristocratic features. "This is blasphemy against the old ways. The Moonseers were exterminated for a reason. They weaken the true nature of the wolf, dilute our power." "No," Dominic replied, his voice calm but implacable. "They reveal our true nature, the balance we were meant to have." He turned to address his own pack directly. "The Dark Claw would have you believe that strength comes only from dominance, from the beast unrestrained by humanity. They worship Fenrir, the wolf who would devour the world." His gaze swept the arena, commanding attention. "But we of Silver Paw follow Luna, who taught that wolf and human are two halves of one whole. Somewhere we lost that truth. We began to fear our wolves, to fight them, or worse, to surrender our humanity to them entirely." Ella felt his grip tighten on hers, drawing strength from their connection. "This woman has reminded me of what we once were, what we can be again. Not divided creatures at war with ourselves, but integrated beings, stronger for our duality." Lord Nathaniel's laugh cut through the moment, cold and mocking. "Pretty words, Blackwood, but they change nothing. Your father was a butcher who slaughtered his own mate in the grip of the beast. Your uncle was no better. The madness runs in your veins, and all here have witnessed your struggle to contain it." He gestured toward Victor's crumpled form. "Even now your cousin lies broken by your rage. You speak of balance while surrounded by the evidence of your violence." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Uncertainty, fear, the old prejudices stirring. Dominic released Ella's hand and stepped forward to address the Dark Claw Alpha directly. "My father and uncle embraced the curse as power. They rejected balance for dominance. I choose a different path." To prove his point, he closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they had returned to their human gray. The partial transformation receded, not with the agonizing struggle it had always required, but with smooth control, like sheathing a weapon. A collective gasp went through the arena. Never had anyone seen such mastery of the shift, such seamless transition between forms. "The alliance with Dark Claw is ended," Dominic stated. "Silver Paw will chart its own course, true to our original nature, balanced, integrated, strong without surrendering to mindless aggression." Lord Nathaniel's face contorted with rage. "You will regret this, Blackwood. The old Alphas were wise to hunt the Moonseers to extinction. They weaken the pack, make wolves into pets, and now you've bound yourself to one." He spat on the ground. "Your father would be ashamed." Dominic's voice remained calm, but steel undergirded every word. "My father was a slave to his beast. I choose freedom, for myself and for my pack." He turned to Elder Thaddeus, whose face had gone pale with fear. "You conspired against your Alpha, against the pack you swore to serve. Your punishment will be decided by the council." To the guards, he added, "Take him to the holding cells, and bring Victor when he wakes, if he wakes." Ella stood quietly through this exchange, feeling the eyes of the pack upon her. She understood what Dominic had done by acknowledging her openly. He had tied his rule, his very legitimacy, to her and what she represented. If she fell, he would fall with her. "Lord Nathaniel," Dominic addressed the Dark Claw Alpha once more, "you and your delegation will leave Silverpaw territory by dawn. Safe passage is granted as a courtesy to our shared history. Do not test my mercy further." Catherine rose beside her father, her beautiful face twisted with hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed, her gaze fixed on Ella. "The Moonseer bloodline should have died generations ago. Perhaps it still will." With that threat hanging in the air, the Dark Claw delegation swept from the arena, Catherine's final glance promising retribution. As they departed, the tension in the arena shifted. Pack members who had been holding their breath now looked at their Alpha King with new eyes, some with wonder, others with wariness, all with a dawning recognition that something fundamental had changed. Dominic turned to Ella, reaching for her hand once more. As their fingers intertwined, a visible shimmer of silver light traced the connection between them, the binding made manifest. "What happens now?" she asked quietly.
His expression softened, visible to those closest to the arena floor, a side of their Alpha King few had ever witnessed. "Now," he replied, "we rebuild what was broken. Not just for us, but for all the pack." He raised their joined hands, addressing his people directly. "Tonight marks a new beginning for Silverpaw. For too long we've lived in fear of our own nature, fighting a battle within ourselves that was never meant to be fought." The crowd listened in rapt attention as Dominic continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena. "The Moonseer gift was not meant to weaken us, but to complete us, to remind us that true strength comes not from dominance alone, but from harmony, the human mind and the wolf's instinct working as one." Ella felt the weight of centuries pressing upon her, the last of a hunted lineage, now suddenly thrust into the light. But alongside that weight came purpose, clarity, a sense that her grandfather's protection and her lifetime of invisibility had prepared her for precisely this moment. "The path ahead won't be easy," Dominic acknowledged. "Darkclaw will not forgive this perceived insult. Thaddeus had allies who shared his views, but Silverpaw has weathered worse storms." He turned to Ella, his eyes reflecting the silver glow of their bound hands. "And we are stronger together than we ever were apart." The words hung in the air, a promise and a declaration. Whatever came next, whatever threats awaited from enemies without or within, they would face it not as Alpha and Omega, not as king and subject, but as two halves of a restored whole. The ancient binding ritual had done more than connect them to each other. It had opened the door to healing a division as old as their kind, offering a glimpse of what werewolves were always meant to be. As the pack slowly dispersed from the arena, whispers following in their wake, Ella and Dominic remained at the center, their joined hands a beacon in the gathering darkness, a light to guide the way forward, not just for themselves, but for all who dared to seek balance over dominance, harmony over control, love over fear. The moon watched from above, bearing silent witness to the first steps of a revolution centuries in the making. Dawn broke over the Silverpaw territories, painting the mountains in hues of gold and amber. Ella stood on the balcony of her new chambers, not the guest quarters she had been given before, but rooms adjacent to the Alpha King's own suite, a symbol of her new status, though what exactly that status was remained undefined. Not quite mate, not merely advisor, something both ancient and entirely new. She traced the silvery scar on her palm, still tingling with the magic of the binding ritual performed in the arena. The connection to Dominic pulsed within her, a constant awareness of his presence, his emotions, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat alongside her own. The bond was unlike anything she had expected, more profound and yet more natural than she could have imagined. Behind her, the door opened without a knock. Only one person would enter so boldly. "The council is gathering," Dominic said, his voice steady, though she could feel his tension through their bond. "Thaddeus's supporters are demanding explanations." She turned to face him. In the morning light, he looked different, still powerful, still unmistakably alpha, but there was a new clarity in his storm-gray eyes, a balance that hadn't been there before. "And what will you tell them?" she asked. "The truth," he replied simply. "That the Blackwood curse has been a lie, or rather, a half-truth. That what they feared as madness was actually a deliberately inflicted wound, passed through generations, and that through the Moonseer binding, that wound is beginning to heal." She nodded, appreciating his directness. "They'll resist. Change frightens people, especially those who've built their power on old ways." A smile touched his lips, genuine if small. "You sound like my advisor already. Isn't that what I am?" She kept her tone light, though the question carried weight. What were they to each other now? The binding had connected them soul to soul, yet they had barely begun to know one another as people. Something shifted in his expression, a softening that reached her through their bond before it showed on his face. "You are more than that, Ella. Much more." He extended his hand, the one bearing the matching silver scar. "But precisely what we are to each other, that's something we'll define together, with time." She placed her hand in his, feeling the bond between them hum with recognition. For now, that was enough. The council chamber buzzed with tension when they entered. 8 members sat at the oval table, with 2 empty seats, Thaddeus's, now vacant following his arrest, and one newly added beside Dominic's at the head of the table. Ella felt the weight of history as she took that seat. the first Omega, the first Moonseer, to sit on the Silver Paw Council in centuries. Connor stood at attention by the door, his eyes watchful. Samuel occupied another seat, still pale from his wounds, but insistent on attending. Jackson leaned against the wall behind them, not officially part of the council, but present by Dominic's command. "We face immediate challenges," Dominic began without preamble. "Darkclaw has withdrawn, but they won't go quietly. Lord Nathaniel has been building toward this alliance for years. He won't abandon his ambitions because of one setback." "They'll attack," said Marcus, an older beta with silver-streaked hair. "It's only a matter of when." "Perhaps," Dominic agreed, "but first they'll try to divide us against ourselves. Nathaniel knows our pack is split over what happened last night." Heads turned toward Ella, some curious, others openly hostile. "Which brings us to the matter at hand," said Councilmember Helena, a severe woman with calculating eyes. "The Moonseer. For generations we believed them extinct, and for good reason. Their influence weakens the pack, softens our warriors." "Does this look weak to you?" Dominic interrupted, rising to his feet. In one fluid motion, he shifted his arm into its wolf form, not the painful, uncontrolled transformation of before, but a seamless melding of man and beast. Claws extended, fur rippling along muscle, yet his eyes remained clear, his mind evidently in full control. The council members recoiled slightly, then leaned forward in fascination as he reversed the transformation with equal ease. "For as long as I can remember," Dominic continued, "I fought my wolf. I feared it would consume me as it consumed my father. Every shift was agony, every full moon a battle for my soul." He gestured toward Ella. "Since the binding ritual, that war is ending. I can access my wolf's strength, its instincts, without surrendering my humanity." "An impressive parlor trick," Helena conceded. "But at what cost? You've tied yourself to an Omega of questionable lineage, exposed our most vulnerable secrets to Darkclaw, and upended traditions that have maintained our pack for generations." "Traditions based on lies," Samuel interjected, his voice weak but determined. "I found the truth in the oldest archives. The Blackwood Curse was deliberately inflicted by a Moonseer in retribution for crimes committed against her family, and the systematic extermination of Moonseers that followed was not to protect the pack, but to ensure the curse could never be lifted, to keep alphas dependent on the council to control their wolves." A shocked silence fell over the chamber. "That's why they were hunted," Ella added quietly. "Not because they weakened the pack, but because they threatened the power structure. An alpha in harmony with their wolf doesn't need the council's restraints or their permission to rule." Helena's face flushed with anger. "How dare you!" "She speaks the truth." Jackson pushed away from the wall, his weathered face solemn. "I was there, 50 years ago, when they executed Eleanor Winters, Ella's grandmother. The old alpha, Dominic's grandfather, gave the order not because she was dangerous, but because she offered to help him find balance. He preferred the power of the beast, even with its cost." "And that cost has been blood," Dominic said grimly. "The blood of our own people, torn apart when alphas lost control. The blood of neighboring packs, attacked in fits of bestial rage. The blood of mates and children, victims of wolves who couldn't separate anger from bloodlust." He looked around the table. "I chose a different path, not just for myself, but for all of Silver Paw." Marcus spoke up, his tone thoughtful. "If what you say is true, then Darkclaw's alliance was never meant for peace. They wanted access to our territories while we were weakened by infighting." "Exactly," Dominic confirmed. "Catherine was trained to push me toward the edge, to trigger the wolf at politically convenient moments. Their ultimate goal was absorption of our pack under their rule." "So what now?" asked Lydia, the youngest council member. "We've rejected their alliance, exposed their plans, and insulted their alpha. War seems inevitable." "Not inevitable," Ella said, surprising herself with her certainty. "Lord Nathaniel doesn't want a direct confrontation. It would be costly with uncertain outcome. He prefers manipulation, exploiting divisions within our ranks." Dominic nodded. "Which is why we must strengthen ourselves from within. The binding ritual that helped me find balance can help others too." "You propose to bind more pack members to Moonseers?" Helena asked incredulously. "There's only one Moonseer here." "For now," Samuel interjected. "But the gift often lies dormant until awakened. There could be others among us with the potential, particularly in bloodlines that intermingled with known Moonseer families." I can sense them, Ella confirmed, another aspect of her abilities becoming clear to her. During the binding, I could see the souls of those in the arena. Some carried a spark similar to mine, faint, untrained, but present. A murmur ran through the council. The implications were staggering, not just one moonseer, but potentially many, each capable of helping pack members find harmony between their dual natures. "This is too much change too quickly," Helena protested. "The pack won't accept it." "They will if they see the benefits," Dominic countered. "Which brings me to my first decree as an alpha in balance." He turned to Ella. "You will establish a training program, working with those who struggle most with their wolves. Samuel and Jackson will assist you." She blinked in surprise. "Me? I barely understand my own abilities." "You understand more than you realize," he replied. "Your grandfather taught you the foundations without naming them, and your instincts guided you through the binding ritual when you had no formal training. The rest, you'll learn as you teach." The responsibility settled on her shoulders, weighty yet somehow right. This was what her grandfather had prepared her for, even if neither of them had fully understood it at the time. "There's more," Dominic continued, addressing the council. "The hierarchy that has divided us into alphas, betas, and omegas needs reformation. Strength comes in many forms, as Ella has demonstrated. Rank should be determined by contribution to the pack, not arbitrary designations of birth." This was the most radical proposal yet. Helena and 2 other council members began to object simultaneously, their protestations overlapping in a cacophony of resistance. Dominic raised a hand, silencing them with alpha authority. "This isn't open for debate. The changes begin today. Connor will oversee the transition in the pack structure, with full authority to implement new protocols." The beta straightened at the door, his expression carefully neutral, though Ella could sense his pride at being entrusted with such a critical task. "Now," Dominic concluded, "to practical matters. Our borders must be secured. Dark Claw will test us, probing for weaknesses. Marcus, strengthen the patrols along the eastern ridge. Lydia, I want you to review our emergency protocols. Ensure all pack members know where to go if attack comes." The meeting continued with assignments and planning, the council gradually shifting from philosophical objections to pragmatic preparations. Through it all, Ella observed the subtle dynamics at play, which council members resisted change most fiercely, which embraced it, which simply waited to see which way the wind would blow. By midday, they had a framework for moving forward. As the council members filed out, Dominic caught Ella's wrist gently. "Stay a moment." When they were alone, save for Jackson and Samuel, Dominic's formal demeanor softened slightly. "You did well," he told her. "They didn't expect such composure from an Omega." "Former Omega," she corrected with a small smile. "Apparently I'm a revolutionary leader now." He chuckled, the sound warming her through their bond. "You always were. You just needed the right revolution." Samuel cleared his throat. "The training program should begin immediately. I've identified several candidates who could benefit most from Ella's guidance." "How many?" she asked, apprehension mixing with determination. 5 to start," the old healer replied. "Young wolves struggling with control, including Victor's sister Alara." Ella raised an eyebrow. "The challenger's sister? Is that wise?" "Strategically essential," Jackson interjected. "Alara has always been different from her brother, more thoughtful, less power-hungry. Bringing her into your first cohort sends a message that this new path is open to all, regardless of family allegiance." "And if she's a spy for Dark Claw?" Ella questioned. "Then better to keep her close where we can watch her," Dominic answered. "Besides, you'll know her true intentions. The binding ritual reveals the soul. There can be no deception." She nodded, conceding the point. "When do we begin?" "Tomorrow," Samuel said. "The waxing moon strengthens your abilities each night. By the time the full moon arrives, your students should be prepared for their first controlled shift." "And before that," Dominic added, "we have more immediate concerns. Victor has awakened." The words hung heavily in the air. Victor's challenge had failed spectacularly, but he remained a threat, both for what he knew and for the symbol he represented to those resistant to change. "What will you do with him?" Ella asked. "Traditionally, failed challengers are executed or exiled," Dominic replied, his expression grim. "But neither serves our purpose now. Death makes him a martyr. Exile sends him straight back to Dark Claw." "There is another option," she suggested quietly. "Let me try to help him." 3 pairs of eyes turned to her in surprise. "You want to perform the binding ritual with Victor?" Jackson asked incredulously. "After he tried to kill you?"
Not the full binding, she clarified. Just enough to show him what's possible. If he could feel even a fraction of the harmony you've found, she directed this to Dominic, it might change his perspective completely. Dominic's jaw tightened, a flicker of possessiveness reaching her through their bond before he mastered it. It's dangerous. Victor has always been unstable, even by Blackwood standards. All the more reason to try, she insisted. If we can help even our enemies find balance, isn't that the ultimate proof that this new path is right? Samuel stroked his beard thoughtfully. There is precedent in the old texts. Partial bindings were used as healing rituals for wolves lost to their beasts. It requires tremendous focus, however, and leaves the Moonseer vulnerable. I'll be there, Dominic stated. Not a suggestion, but a fact. If he makes any threatening move. She placed her hand on his arm. He won't, not if this works. The decision made, they moved to the holding cells deep beneath the palace. The dungeons were rarely used, a relic from more brutal times. Victor occupied the largest cell, his injuries from the arena fight still evident in the bruising across his face and the careful way he held himself. He looked up as they approached, surprise flickering across his features, before settling into defiance. Come to finish what you started, cousin? Or does the Moonseer want to watch? We've come to offer you a choice, Dominic replied evenly. Death, exile, or a third option. How generous, Victor sneered. What's behind door number 3? Lifelong imprisonment? Healing, Ella said, stepping forward. A chance to experience what your cousin has found, harmony between man and wolf. Victor laughed bitterly. The famous Blackwood curse, our family's greatest strength and darkest secret. You think you've broken it with your Moonseer magic? Perhaps momentarily, but the beast always returns, stronger and hungrier than before. It doesn't have to be that way, she insisted, moving closer to the bars. The curse was never your true nature. It was inflicted on your bloodline. It can be healed. Something vulnerable flashed in Victor's eyes before he masked it with contempt. Pretty lies. I've felt the wolf's power. There's no controlling it, only riding its strength for as long as possible before it consumes you. I felt the same, Dominic said quietly. Every shift was a battle I knew I'd eventually lose. Every full moon, another step toward becoming my father. He extended his hand, showing the silver scar. Until now. A parlor trick, Victor dismissed, but his gaze remained fixed on the scar. Let me show you, Ella offered. Not the full binding, you haven't earned that trust, but enough to let you feel what's possible. Suspicion warred with desperate hope on Victor's face. Why would you help me? I tried to kill you. Because this isn't about you, or me, or even Dominic, she replied. It's about healing what was broken in all werewolves, starting with those who need it most. Something in her words seemed to reach him. His shoulders slumped slightly, the mask of arrogance slipping to reveal exhaustion beneath. The wolf tears at me constantly, he admitted, voice barely audible. Even now it claws for release, hungry for violence. I haven't slept more than an hour at a time in years. It was the first honest thing she'd heard from him, and it confirmed what she'd suspected. Beneath his ambition and cruelty lay a man tormented by the same curse that had plagued Dominic. Open the cell, she instructed the guard. Dominic tensed beside her, but didn't countermand the order. The heavy iron door swung open with a groan of ancient hinges. If you try anything, Dominic warned his cousin, it will be the last move you ever make. Victor nodded, understanding the terms. Ella entered the cell cautiously, aware of the risk she was taking. This was not the arena with hundreds of witnesses. Here in the dungeons, an attack could come swift and deadly. Your hand, she requested, extending her own. Victor hesitated, then slowly offered his palm. Unlike the ritual with Dominic, she didn't use the knife. This would be a surface connection, enough to demonstrate but not to permanently bind. She placed her scarred palm against his and closed her eyes, reaching for the newly awakened power within her. The waxing moon, though hidden by stone walls and daylight, responded to her call. She felt the silver energy of her bloodline stirring, flowing through the connection between them. By sight granted, Wolf acknowledged, she murmured, the words coming to her instinctively. A variant of the binding ritual, gentler but still potent. What rages calmed, what tears soothed. Victor gasped as the silver light flickered between their palms, weaker than the binding with Dominic, but unmistakable. Through the temporary connection, Ella caught glimpses of his soul, the anger and ambition on the surface, but beneath it, fear and desperation,
A lifetime of fighting a losing battle against the beast within. Feel it, she encouraged him. Your wolf doesn't need to be your enemy. It's part of you, not something to control through dominance, but to accept in harmony. For a brief moment, Victor's expression transformed, wonder replacing cynicism as he experienced the first taste of what balance might feel like. His breathing slowed, tension visibly draining from his shoulders. Then it was over. She withdrew her hand, the silver light fading between them. Victor stared at his palm, then at her, confusion and longing warring in his eyes. That's what he feels? All the time now? He asked, jerking his head toward Dominic. A stronger version, she confirmed. The full binding is permanent, a true union of souls. This was just a glimpse. Victor sank onto the stone bench of his cell, the implications overwhelming him. I never knew it could be different, he whispered. They always told us the wolf's rage was our birthright, our power. They lied, Dominic said flatly, to keep us dependent on their guidance, fighting a battle we could never win alone. And now? Victor looked up, suddenly appearing younger, less hardened. What happens to me? Dominic considered his cousin for a long moment. You'll join Ella's training program. You'll learn to find your own balance under close supervision. If you succeed, you may earn a place in the new Silver Paw we're building. And if I refuse? The question held less defiance now, more genuine inquiry. Then exile, Dominic replied without hesitation. But I think you've had a taste of something you've wanted your entire life. Are you really willing to walk away from it? Victor's gaze dropped to his palm, where the echo of silver light had already faded. No, he admitted quietly. I'm not. As they left the dungeons, Ella felt both drained and exhilarated. Using her abilities took a physical toll she was only beginning to understand, yet each experience taught her more about the extent of her power. That was dangerous, Dominic commented as they ascended the stairs. Victor has always been unpredictable. It was necessary, she countered. Healing the rift in your family is symbolic of healing the rift in all werewolves. If Victor can change, anyone can. Perhaps, he conceded, though doubt lingered in his tone. But tread carefully. Not everyone wants to be healed. Some have built their entire identity around the power that comes from embracing the beast. Like your father, she said softly. He nodded, shadows of old pain crossing his face. And like Lord Nathaniel. Don't underestimate the resistance we'll face, both from within and without. They reached the main level of the palace, where the afternoon sun streamed through high windows. Jackson awaited them, his expression grave. Scouts have returned from the eastern border, he reported without preamble. Dark Claw forces are gathering, not just warriors. They've brought their elders, their healers. Dominic frowned. A full migration? That makes no sense unless they're planning to stay, Ella finished, understanding dawning. This isn't just an attack, it's an invasion. Jackson nodded grimly. They've made camp just beyond our territory. The scouts counted at least 300 wolves, with more arriving. We're outnumbered almost 2 to 1, Dominic calculated aloud. Even with our home advantage, a direct confrontation would be costly. It might not come to that, Ella suggested. Lord Nathaniel prefers manipulation to open warfare. He'll try to exploit our internal divisions first. Speaking of which, Jackson added, there's movement inside our borders too. Several families from the outer settlements have packed up and headed east, toward Dark Claw territory. Dominic's jaw tightened. Thaddeus's supporters, fleeing before the change reaches them. Or reporting our weaknesses to the enemy, Jackson pointed out. Either way, we're vulnerable on multiple fronts. The challenges were mounting faster than Ella had anticipated. She had naively hoped for time to establish the training program, to prove the value of the Moonseer approach before facing external threats. But events were accelerating, forcing their hand. We need to move more quickly, she decided. The training can't wait for formal structures. I need to work with as many wolves as possible, as soon as possible, especially those with strategic value. You'll exhaust yourself, Dominic objected, concern flowing through their bond. I'll pace myself, she assured him. But every wolf that finds balance is another defender who won't lose control in battle. We need that advantage. He nodded reluctantly, acknowledging the logic. Jackson, double the border patrols. I want to know the moment Dark Claw makes any move, and send word to the outer settlements. Any family that wishes greater protection can relocate closer to the central pack lands. What about the council? Ella asked. Some of them still resist the changes. They'll fall in line or step down, Dominic said with quiet authority.
The luxury of gradual transition is gone. Silverpaw must adapt now or face extinction.
As Jackson departed to implement their decisions, Dominic turned to Ella, his expression softening slightly.
This isn't what I wanted for your first days in your new role, crisis management rather than rebuilding.
She shrugged. My grandfather always said true character emerges under pressure. Perhaps the same is true for new traditions. He brushed a strand of pale hair from her face, the gesture unexpectedly tender. Through their bond, she felt his concern mingled with something deeper, something neither of them had named yet.
Rest while you can, he advised. Tonight we meet with your first students. Tomorrow we expand the program. And soon enough, we face Darkclaw, one way or another.
The weight of responsibility settled more firmly on her shoulders,
yet it didn't crush her as it might have only days ago. She had found her purpose, her strength, her place. The forgotten Omega had become the Moonseer, the bridge between past and future, the key to healing wounds centuries in the making.
As Dominic departed to oversee the strengthening of their defenses, Ella returned to her chambers. She needed to prepare for the evening's work, not just physically, but mentally. The partial binding with Victor had shown her how demanding even a temporary connection could be. To work with 5 new students would test the limits of her endurance. She sank onto a cushioned window seat, gazing out at the mountains that had always defined the boundaries of her world. Somewhere beyond those peaks, Darkclaw gathered their forces. Somewhere among these halls, resistance to change still festered. The challenges ahead were daunting, perhaps impossible. Yet for the first time in her life, Ella felt equal to them. The binding with Dominic had changed more than their individual fates. It had awakened a certainty within her that this was the path she was born to walk. The pendant at her throat seemed to warm with the thought, as if her grandfather's spirit approved of the journey ahead. Their weakness had indeed become their greatest strength. What remained to be seen was whether that strength would be enough to face the gathering storm. The full moon hung heavy and luminous above the Silverpaw territories, bathing the mountainous landscape in ethereal light. In the central courtyard of the palace, Ella stood before her students. 5 wolves of varying ages and ranks who had volunteered or been selected for the first Moonseer training cohort. Among them stood Alara, Victor's sister, her dark hair and sharp features reminiscent of her brother, but with a thoughtfulness in her eyes he lacked. Beside her was Marcus's son, Theo, barely 20 and already struggling with violent shifts. 2 sisters from the border territories, Mira and Sora, identical twins whose simultaneous transformations often triggered destructive resonance between them. And finally, to everyone's surprise, Helena's grandson Owen, sent by the councilwoman herself in what appeared to be a tentative olive branch. For the past 2 weeks, Ella had worked with them individually and as a group, teaching techniques to bridge the divide between human consciousness and wolf instinct. Tonight would be their first test, a controlled shift under the full moon when the pull of the beast was strongest. "Remember what we practiced," Ella instructed, her voice calm despite her own nervousness. This was the moment that would prove or disprove the value of everything they'd been building. The moon doesn't force the change, it invites it. Accept the invitation on your own terms. Jackson and Samuel stood nearby, ready to intervene if necessary. Dominic observed from the balcony above, his presence a silent reassurance through their bond. In the 2 weeks since the binding ritual, their connection had deepened, allowing them to sense each other's emotions, and even, occasionally, glimpses of thought. It was both intimate and strange, a closeness neither had experienced before. "Begin when you're ready," she told her students. "Don't fight the wolf, don't surrender to it. Meet it as an equal part of yourself." One by one, they closed their eyes, focusing on the techniques she'd taught them, visualizing the wolf not as a separate entity, but as another aspect of their own soul, acknowledging its strength and instincts while maintaining human awareness. The transformations began, but unlike the violent, bone-breaking shifts Ella had witnessed in the past, these were fluid, almost graceful. Fur rippled across skin, limbs elongated, faces transformed. Yet in each pair of now amber eyes, human consciousness remained clearly present. 5 wolves stood in the courtyard, fully transformed yet completely in control. They moved with purpose rather than frenzy, their gazes alert and aware.
When Ella approached them, they responded to her commands, demonstrating that they retained their understanding of human speech and intent. "Remarkable," Samuel murmured, awe evident in his voice. "In all my years, I never thought I'd see such harmony." Ella felt a surge of pride, both in her students and in herself. What had begun as a desperate gamble to help one troubled alpha had evolved into something revolutionary, a new way for all werewolves to exist. Dominic descended from the balcony, joining her in the courtyard. Through their bond, she felt his amazement and satisfaction, along with a deeper current of something that felt increasingly like devotion. "You've accomplished in 2 weeks what generations of alphas failed to achieve," he said quietly. "You've changed everything." The moment of triumph was interrupted by Connor's arrival, his expression grave despite the wonder he'd just witnessed. "Your Majesty, scouts report movement at the eastern border. Dark Claw forces have crossed into our territory." The peaceful atmosphere shattered. Dominic's posture stiffened, though his eyes remained clear. The old pattern of rage triggering uncontrolled shifting no longer governed him. "How many?" he asked. "At least 200 warriors," Connor replied grimly, "with Lord Nathaniel and Catherine leading them personally." "And our defenses?" "In position, as you ordered. We can hold the main passes, but some of the smaller trails are vulnerable." Dominic turned to the transformed wolves in the courtyard. "Return to human form," he instructed. "We have a situation that requires clear heads." The reverse transformations proceeded with the same control as the initial shifts, another testament to Ella's training. Within moments, 5 humans stood where wolves had been, their expressions alert rather than exhausted, as was typical after a full moon shift. "Did you hear?" Dominic asked them. Alara nodded, speaking for the group. "Dark Claw has invaded. We're ready to help defend the pack." "Not just defend," Dominic corrected. "I need you as examples. Each of you will join a different border unit, showing our warriors what controlled shifting looks like in battle. This is as much about morale as tactics." Ella understood his strategy immediately. The sight of wolves fighting with human intelligence and restraint would demonstrate the advantages of the new approach, potentially swaying more pack members toward acceptance. "What about me?" she asked, knowing her role couldn't be on the front lines despite her growing combat training with Jackson. Dominic's expression softened slightly. "You'll remain here, continuing to train others as they come forward. And," he hesitated, "there's another task, one only you can perform." Before he could elaborate, a commotion erupted at the courtyard entrance. Victor burst through, flanked by concerned guards who clearly hadn't wanted to let him pass. "It's a trap," he announced without preamble. "The eastern attack is a diversion. Their main force is coming through the northern ravine, the old mining passage." Suspicion flared immediately. Victor had shown progress in his training, but trust came slowly after his betrayal. "How would you know this?" Dominic demanded. "Catherine sent a messenger," Victor admitted. "She still thinks I'm her ally. She wanted to warn me to stay clear of the real battlefront." Ella studied him carefully, using her developing moonseer senses to read his intent. Though not fully bound to him, the partial connection she'd established during their session in the dungeon allowed her glimpses of his emotional state. What she felt now was genuine concern, overlaid with hope for redemption. "He's telling the truth," she confirmed, "at least as he knows it." Dominic nodded, accepting her assessment. "Connor, redirect half our forces to the northern ravine. Jackson, take Alara and Theo with you. Their control will be crucial in the confined space." "What about Catherine's messenger?" Samuel asked. "Detained in the lower cells," Victor replied. "I thought you might want to question him." It was a small gesture of loyalty, but significant. Victor had chosen to bring this information directly, rather than use it for personal advantage. "The northern ravine is barely defensible," Connor pointed out. "It narrows in places, but once they break through, they have a direct path to the central settlements." "Then we don't just defend it," Dominic decided. "We meet them halfway. Take the fight to them before they reach our civilians." The next hour passed in a flurry of preparations. Warriors were reassigned, strategies revised, evacuation plans for the vulnerable implemented. Through it all, Ella continued working with newly volunteered wolves, teaching abbreviated versions of her techniques, not enough for full harmony, but sufficient to maintain control during battle. As moonlight gave way to pre-dawn glow, Dominic found her in the training hall, exhausted but still working with a group of young betas. "You need rest," he said, concern flowing through their bond. "So do you," she countered. "Yet here we are." He gestured for her to join him in the corridor, away from curious ears.
"There's something I haven't told you," he admitted once they were alone. "Something about the binding ritual." She sensed his unease. "What is it?" Samuel discovered an ancient text about moonseer bindings. In times of great danger, the connection can be weaponized. The word sent a chill through her. "What does that mean?" "It means our linked souls can channel power between us," he explained. "My strength can flow to you, your clarity to me. But it requires absolute trust, and it's dangerous. If the balance shifts too far in either direction, both could be lost." She absorbed this information, understanding its implications. "You want to try this during the battle?" "Only if necessary," he assured her. "Only as a last resort. But I needed you to know it was possible." The weight of their bond suddenly felt heavier, its potential both miraculous and terrifying. How would we do it? Blood contact under moonlight, combined with complete emotional openness. No barriers, no reservations. His storm-gray eyes held hers. Complete vulnerability. For wolves raised to value strength and dominance above all, nothing could be more frightening than such exposure. Yet Ella felt no hesitation. "If it comes to that," she promised, "I'm ready." He touched her cheek briefly, gratitude flowing through their connection. "Get what rest you can. Dawn brings battle." The attack came not with dawn, but with the final darkness before it. Howls echoed across the mountains as Dark Claw forces engaged Silver Paw defenders at multiple points. Through their bond, Ella felt Dominic's focus sharpen as he coordinated their response from the command center, his wolf's instincts and his human strategic mind working in perfect harmony. Reports filtered in throughout the morning, the eastern attack indeed proving to be the feint Victor had warned of, while the northern ravine became the site of fierce combat. Silverpaw's newly trained wolves fought with unprecedented effectiveness, maintaining control during their shifts and executing complex tactics that had previously been impossible when the beast took over. By midday, the battle lines had stabilized. Dark Claw's numerical advantage was offset by Silverpaw's superior position and the unexpected discipline of their forces. A stalemate developed, with neither side able to gain decisive momentum. Then everything changed. Connor burst into this training hall where Ella was working with another group of volunteers. "They've broken through the western perimeter," he reported, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "A third force we didn't detect. They're heading straight for the palace." Ella's heart raced. The western approach was supposed to be impassable, sheer cliffs and dense forest with no established trails. "How many?" 30 or 40 elite warriors, Connor replied grimly, with Catherine leading them personally. Understanding dawned. This wasn't a military move, but an assassination attempt. A small, elite force targeting leadership while the main armies were engaged elsewhere. "Where's Dominic?" she demanded. "Heading to intercept them with a squad of royal guards. He sent me to protect you." But Ella was already moving toward the door. "The palace defenders need organization. You stay here and coordinate evacuation of the non-combatants." "My orders are to keep you safe," Connor protested. "And mine are to protect this pack," she countered, authority resonating in her voice, "including its alpha." Before he could argue further, she was racing through the corridors, following the pull of her bond with Dominic. He was moving fast, determination and controlled aggression flowing through their connection. She reached out with her mind, trying to warn him about Catherine's likely intent, unsure if the message would reach him. The sounds of combat led her to the western courtyard, where Silver Paw defenders clashed with Dark Claw invaders. The fighting was brutal, wolves in various states of transformation locked in deadly struggle. Dominic stood at the center, partially shifted, holding the line against 3 attackers simultaneously. Ella scanned the chaos, seeking Catherine. The Dark Claw princess was nowhere visible, which meant, "Looking for someone?" The voice came from behind her, cold and venomous. Ella turned to find Catherine emerging from the shadows of a nearby archway, already half transformed, her beautiful features elongating into something feral. This was never about territory, Ella realized aloud. It was about destroying the Moonseer bloodline, about preserving the old ways. Catherine's laugh was a growling rumble. "The old ways are what make us strong. Your tamed wolves are an abomination, neither beast nor human, weakened by restraint." She circled slowly, claws extending from her fingertips. "My father thinks too small. He wants land, alliances. I see the larger threat you represent." "To your power," Ella concluded, "not to our kind." "They're one and the same," Catherine snarled. "Wolves are meant to dominate through strength, through the power of the beast. Your harmony undermines the natural order." "There's nothing natural about the Blackwood curse," Ella countered, keeping pace with Catherine's circling movement. "It was inflicted by a moonseer seeking vengeance. What I've done is restore the true natural order." Rage flashed across Catherine's features. "Lies won't save you." She lunged without warning, claws slashing for Ella's throat. Weeks of training with Jackson saved her as she ducked and rolled, avoiding the killing strike by inches. She had no weapons, no claws of her own, only the knowledge Jackson had imparted and the growing power of her moonseer abilities. Catherine was fully transformed now, a sleek black wolf with amber eyes burning with hatred. She circled again, more cautiously this time, assessing. Ella reached for her pendant, drawing strength from the ancient symbol. She had no illusions about winning this fight through physical prowess. Her only hope lay in her unique gifts. As Catherine sprang again, Ella didn't dodge. Instead, she reached out with both hands, fingers splayed toward the attacking wolf. "See yourself," she commanded, channeling every ounce of her moonseer power into the words. A flash of silver light erupted between them. Catherine's momentum carried her forward, but she staggered as the light touched her, a whine of confusion escaping her throat. For an instant, just an instant, Ella could see into her soul, could see the tangled mess of ambition, fear, and indoctrination that drove her. But Catherine's will was strong, her belief in her path unwavering. She shook off the effect with a snarl and renewed her attack, catching Ella's arm in powerful jaws. Pain lanced through her as teeth penetrated flesh. Through their bond, Ella felt Dominic's sudden alarm as her pain reached him. He was fighting his way toward her, desperation fueling his strength, but enemies stood between them. Catherine released her arm and circled again, blood dripping from her muzzle. "Your tricks won't work on me," she growled, the words distorted but comprehensible through her wolf's throat. "I've been prepared for moonseers my entire life." Ella clutched her bleeding arm, backing toward a stone pillar. "Prepared by lies," she gasped. "You've never experienced true harmony. You don't know what you're fighting against." "I know enough," Catherine replied, tensing for another spring. Across the courtyard, Dominic roared her name, fighting with renewed fury to reach her. But he wouldn't make it in time. Catherine was launching herself forward, jaws open for a killing bite. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Ella remembered Dominic's words about weaponizing their bond, about the dangerous potential of their connection. There was no time for caution, no time for preparation, only desperate need. She pressed her bleeding arm against the stone behind her, marking it with her blood. "By blood shared," she whispered, reaching through their bond with all her strength. The connection between them flared blindingly bright in her mind's eye. She felt Dominic's power flowing toward her, not just his physical strength, but his alpha essence, the commanding presence that made others instinctively submit. It surged through her veins like liquid fire, painful and exhilarating. As Catherine's jaws neared her throat, Ella met her gaze directly and spoke a single word. "Stop." The command carried the weight of alpha authority, amplified by moonseer power and the ancient binding ritual. It struck Catherine like a physical blow, halting her mid-leap. She crashed to the ground before Ella, her body trembling with the effort to resist the command. "What? What are you doing to me?" Catherine gasped, her wolf form struggling against an invisible force. "Showing you the truth," Ella replied, her voice resonating with power not entirely her own. She knelt beside the immobilized wolf, placing her bleeding palm against Catherine's head. By moon witnessed, by truth revealed. It wasn't a binding, not even a partial one like she'd performed with Victor. This was something different, something she hadn't known she could do until this moment. Through their point of contact, she forced clarity into Catherine's mind, burned away the layers of propaganda and fear that had shaped her worldview. Catherine howled, the sound transforming from rage to anguish as decades of certainty crumbled beneath the weight of undeniable truth. She saw her father's manipulation, saw the lie of wolf superiority based on uncontrolled aggression, saw the hollow emptiness of the path she had dedicated her life to. Across the courtyard, Dominic finally broke through the last of his opponents. He raced to Ella's side, partially shifted, his eyes wide with concern and wonder at what he was witnessing. "Help me," Ella gasped, the strain of channeling so much power threatening to overwhelm her. "Complete the circle."
Understanding immediately, he pressed his hand atop hers, where it connected with Catherine's trembling form. The circuit closed, Ella drawing strength from Dominic, filtering it through her moonseer abilities, directing it into Catherine's consciousness. For a breathless moment, the three of them existed in perfect stasis, a tableau of transformation at its most profound. Then Catherine collapsed, her wolf form receding, leaving her human and vulnerable on the stone floor. Dominic caught Ella as she swayed, the backlash of power nearly knocking her unconscious. Through their bond, he steadied her, absorbing some of the strain. "What did you do?" he asked softly, awe in his voice. "Showed her the cost of her father's path," she replied weakly. "Showed her what harmony feels like, just for an instant. The choice is still hers, but now it's an informed choice." Around them, the sounds of battle were changing. Reports filtered in from all fronts. Dark Claw forces faltering as news spread of Catherine's defeat. Silverpaw defenders pressing their advantage with disciplined coordination that their opponents couldn't match. By sunset, the invasion had collapsed entirely. Lord Nathaniel, learning of his daughter's capture, had retreated with his remaining forces back across the border. Prisoners were taken, wounded treated, victories and losses counted. In the great hall of the palace, Silverpaw gathered to hear their Alpha King's address. Dominic stood before his pack, Ella at his side, their bound hands visible to all. Catherine knelt before them, neither prisoner nor guest, her status as uncertain as her expression. "Today marks a turning point," Dominic began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Not just in our conflict with Dark Claw, but in the very nature of what it means to be werewolf. For generations, we have accepted the lie that our dual nature is a curse, that wolf and human must forever war within us." He raised his and Ella's joined hands, the silver scars of their binding gleaming in the torchlight. "This is the truth. We are neither beast nor human, but both in harmony. Our strength comes not from surrendering to the wolf's rage, but from integrating its power with human wisdom and restraint." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly, stronger than they would have been even days earlier. The evidence was undeniable. Wolves who had fought with control and clarity had overwhelmingly prevailed against those lost to bestial fury. The old hierarchies of Alpha, Beta, and Omega served a world where dominance was all that mattered, Dominic continued. "In the Silver Paw we are building, contribution to the pack and mastery of self will determine one's place." He turned to Catherine, still kneeling before them. "You came to destroy what you did not understand. Having glimpsed the truth, what say you now?" Catherine raised her head, her expression haunted but clear. "I was wrong," she admitted, the words clearly costing her considerable pride. "What I felt when—" she glanced at Ella, "when the moonseer touched my mind, I never knew such balance was possible." "And your father?" Dominic pressed. "Where does Lord Nathaniel stand?" "He will never accept this path," Catherine said with certainty. "He has built his entire identity on the old ways. He would rather die than change." "Then he will eventually fall," Dominic stated simply. "Not to our aggression, but to the inevitable tide of truth. As for you, you have a choice. Return to Dark Claw, or remain here as our guest while you discover your own balance." The offer stunned the assembly. Catherine had led an assassination attempt. By pack law, her life was forfeit. Yet here was the Alpha King extending mercy, even opportunity, to an enemy. Catherine looked as surprised as anyone. "You would trust me after what I tried to do?" "Trust must be earned," Dominic replied, "but understanding can begin immediately. You felt what harmony offers. Do you wish to explore it further, or return to a path you now know is built on lies?" The hall held its breath as Catherine considered. Ella could sense the war within her, pride versus truth, the comfort of certainty against the challenge of change. "I will stay," Catherine finally declared, "not as ally, not yet, but as student." Dominic nodded, satisfaction evident in his bearing. "So be it." He turned back to address the full assembly. "Today's victory belongs to all Silverpaw, but especially to those who embraced a new way of being. Let this be the first of many victories, not just on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of werewolves everywhere." As the assembly dispersed, breaking into celebratory groups and urgent planning sessions, Dominic drew Ella aside to a quiet alcove. Through their bond, she felt his exhaustion mingled with profound satisfaction and something deeper,
something they had both been circling, but not naming.
"You nearly died today," he said quietly. "When I felt your pain, when I knew Catherine had you cornered."
He trailed off, emotion making his voice rough. "But I didn't die," she reminded him, squeezing his hand. "Our bond saved me, saved us both." "It's more than a bond now," he said, meeting her eyes directly. "You know that." She nodded, feeling the truth of it in every fiber of her being. What had begun as a desperate gambit, an alliance of necessity, had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. The binding ritual had connected their souls, but their hearts had followed a path of their own. "What happens now?" she asked, echoing a question she had posed weeks earlier when everything was uncertain. Now it carried different weight, different implications. Dominic touched her face gently, his fingers tracing the contour of her cheek. "Now we build. Not just a pack, not just a new way of being werewolf." He hesitated, vulnerability unusual for an alpha showing in his eyes. "But a life together, if that's what you want." The forgotten Omega who had stood alone at the selection ceremony, invisible and unwanted, had become the moonseer who had changed the course of werewolf history, had become the woman now being asked, not commanded but asked, to share a life with the Alpha King. "It is," she said simply, no hesitation in her voice or heart. "It always has been, from the moment I saw you. Not the king, not the beast, but the man caught between." Under the watching moon, their lips met in a kiss that sealed what the ritual had begun, a union of equals, of complementary strengths, of wolf and human in perfect harmony. The pendant at her throat glowed softly, her grandfather's final gift, now a symbol not of protection through invisibility, but of power through authentic being. In the distance, wolves howled, not in rage or hunger, but in celebration. A new era had begun for Silverpaw, for werewolves everywhere. The forgotten Omega had found her place at last, not by fitting into the world as it was, but by helping to create the world as it should be. Their weakness had indeed become their greatest strength.